across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's me, Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for the great Ian Collins today, here on the home of common sense, that is Talk. And we are delighted to have in the studio with us today, for the first half an hour of our show, we have Chloe Dobbs, who is a political commentator, who will be joining us and taking us through today's stories. And where do we begin? Well, coming up, Downing Street is warning Britain must repair its fraying social fabric to avoid another summer of discontent amid fears of renewed unrest over immigration after violent protests at an Epping asylum hotel, the worst street disorder since last year. Meanwhile, Epping police are due to hold a press conference very shortly where they are expected to explain their handling of the demonstrations after admitting to escorting pro-migrant protesters to the asylum hotel at the centre of the unrest. And doctors will be going ahead with 5 days of strikes later this week after talks broke down between the Health Secretary and the British Medical Association. You know, ladies and gentlemen, what to do. You call us here on 0344 499 1000, texting the word TALK at the start of your message to 87222, or follow us and message us on X at talkTV. We want you to be our voice. We want you to have your say on the stories of the day. And the question that I want to pose to you is simple. How do we repair Britain's broken social fabric? Please make sure you get in touch and tell us what you think throughout the show. But I'm going to quickly swing straight over to our great commentator and my guest in the studio, Chloe Dobbs, who's going to share with us her views and her understandings. Well, Chloe, we've had a week, haven't we? We've had Nigel Farage at the start of the week give this big press conference about his 6-week campaign over lawless Britain. And in there, he addresses the Epping violence that we saw, but also the peaceful protest that was there initially, where he says many in London don't understand just how on the brink of civil unrest we as a country are. He's then derided as stoking fear, stoking division, stirring up anger in order to try and create a summer of violence. And then we get told 24 hours later, Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister in the Cabinet, is telling the whole Cabinet it's really bad out there. And there is on the brink of civil unrest, and we could fear us following down the Southport track. Amazing how when a Labour person says it, it's fine. When Nigel Farage says it, it must be all bad. And then we obviously do see the scenes at Epping. And of course, we don't ever want to see violence. And of course, there would have been a tiny minority of far-right mindless thugs who would have turned up to stoke it. But let's not forget that we were told initially that the pro-migrant protesters, the Antifa-type brigade, were there of their own fruition. The police had not escorted them. We've now got the video footage. And I think, actually, if we go to a clip, we've got Nigel Farage exposing this very thing today, where he's also calling for the resignation of the Chief Constable of Essex Police.
Have a look at this video.
If these are locals, why are they getting a police car? Where time's the next bus? You wait 15 minutes for a bus and then 3 come all along at once. Look, they're all cramming in.
This shows stand up to racism, as they're called, with Antifa, a violent, thuggish group, arriving at the train station and literally, by Essex Police, being bussed to the Bell Hotel. These were the people that caused the disturbances. These were the people that caused the riots. Essex Police caused the disturbances. What on earth were Essex Police thinking? Is it that they just hate so much ordinary residents determined to stand up for their own rights? I don't know the answer to that question. What I do know is what Essex Police have done here is absolutely disgraceful. One of the most extraordinary acts I've seen from the police force in my lifetime. And for bussing Antifa, oh, and by the way, many of them masked protesters, for doing this, heads must roll. There is no way the Chief Constable or the Police and Crime Commissioner in Essex can stay in their posts. This is a disgrace.
Nigel Farage posting there on his X account today. Chloe, what's your take? Is it time for the Chief Constable of Essex Police to resign?
Yes, I think, or someone else, or he needs to have a big telling off at the very least, because we see time and time again in any kind of job that you have where you're paid by the state, you just never get fired when something goes disastrously wrong. There needs to be accountability. There were several things that went wrong on that day. I mean, that video that he showed there is just shocking. I mean, when I saw that, I thought, surely this is too good to be true. The police escorting the people, giving them a free taxi ride to the protest where they know these guys are going to cause chaos. That was crazy. But then there was, I don't know if you saw the other video where the police, they go through a crowd of people at a really fast pace and hit a guy quite hard after knocking over a load of fences. I don't know if you saw that, and we don't have 100% verification as to exactly what was going on there, but that raised a lot of eyebrows. And then there was another one where one of the riot police, they knocked out a guy's tooth. That to me looked more like an accident, but people were looking at several videos from that day and thinking, what on earth is going on? On the question of has Angela Rayner responded appropriately? I think it's nice to actually see the people in government recognising the long-term cause of rioting, because we saw it just dismissed as far-right thuggery last year, and I absolutely don't condone rioting, but it was absolutely crucial that the people leading this country actually recognised the grievances that had led to people going on the streets, and I don't think they quite got it. Whether they'll actually take the appropriate action to increase integration in society, sort out immigration, is another matter. That I'll believe it when I see it. But it's nice to see them actually recognising what is wrong.
It seems like Angela Rayner is the only one who gets it. We had that note that mysteriously made its way to the Telegraph, where she was saying to Rachel Reeves ahead of the budget, migrants who come over here shouldn't be able to access any state benefits for a certain period of time. A massive swing away from what would have been traditionally seen as Labour territory. Now we're getting it briefed out that she's in cabinet telling people that there are legitimate emotions amongst the British people about the fact that migrant hotels are popping up left, right and centre, and with that following crime, including, as we saw only this week in The Sun, a illegal migrant who got a pathetic 14-month sentence for sexually assaulting a vulnerable young girl. This is just absolutely crazy, and rightly I think the public do hold anger, and when they are dismissed and they are looked down upon, they're going to react. And what we don't want, as you say, is violence. But unless politicians actually listen and understand what's causing the anger, then surely we're in trouble. And maybe Angela Rayner is the only hope for Labour.
I mean, I wouldn't be wishing for her to be Prime Minister tomorrow. I think she's more left-wing than Keir Starmer. I think she would bring in more socialist policies when it comes to the economy. I believe there was a report came out that when it comes to her house building target, she is 170,000 homes behind schedule there, and we've got the lowest number of planning applications approved in 13 years. So I wouldn't say that she's a great politician, but on this, she's at least starting to recognise what is going wrong. I'm not convinced that she's some anti-immigration czar. I mean, I believe she said before the general election that communities across the country all need to take their fair share of migrants. I think she's flipped from being one of the refugees welcome lot to, I think, you know, being actually terrified for maybe losing her seat, or just, you know, the Labour Party not being in power, and, well, not just losing the general election, but losing it incredibly badly in 2029. We're seeing poll after poll coming out saying that a whole load of the cabinet are just going to be wiped out at the next general election because people are furious with the Labour Party. They've been here for a year. They've told us, oh, we're going to smash the gangs and we're going to sort this mess out. And all they've got to show for it is they've made some fancy white paper. They've talked about it a little bit, and maybe we'll send 50 migrants back to France a week, but I don't think anyone's really buying it. And the thing is people don't mind. This is not a racist country, and people don't mind seeing people of different nationalities treated equally. But what people absolutely despise is seeing that someone is being treated better than them. I mean, I spoke to a veteran yesterday who was raising money on the street for homeless veterans, and he was so furious to see that there are people coming across on boats, getting hotels, whilst he's got a load of mates that are on the streets that he's trying to help, but the government isn't helping them. And that really infuriates people. As I said, I don't condone rioting, but I can at least see why people are being driven to the streets. Well,
especially when they know it's going to cost around £5 billion a year to house illegal migrants. We know the government's now openly admitting that their plan to empty hotels means putting people into social or private rented accommodation in communities, which will further make rent prices go up, make affordability of buying a new home even harder, as well as British citizens who want to get on the housing ladder, maybe through social housing as well, unable to do so, whilst lining the pockets of a few landlords, and hotels themselves even being purchased by the government. So technically it's no longer a hotel in order to be able to claim that they have then emptied. And that is all by 2029, so 4 more years of hotels still to go. Record numbers up around 50% of small boat crossings that we've seen already. Yet Sir Keir Starmer's written today in The Sun that he understands his great deal with Germany, his great deal with France is going to help pave the way. The sanctioning that David Lammy's now doing on certain individuals, freezing their assets in his country, access to their bank accounts and banning them from coming to the UK who have been in the supply chain of these boats. This is all going to fix it, isn't it?
I highly doubt it. I mean, if he's lucky, he might manage to reduce the numbers slightly. But it's quite embarrassing for them that not only have the numbers haven't even just stayed the same over the time they've been in power. They haven't just made no progress, they've actually gone backwards. And we've got the numbers going up. And they can try and blame the weather. And fair enough, we have had some decent weather over the past few months, but I don't think that really explains exactly what's going on. I mean, I was in Calais before the general election last year, and all the guys there told us we are waiting for Keir Starmer to get in to cross because we know he'll scrap Rwanda on day one. They're actually a bit worried about it. I know some people would say, oh, it wasn't going to be a successful deterrent, but to me it seemed like it was starting to work. And as soon as Keir Starmer came in, they were all straight across on the boats. They're not scared at all of Keir Starmer. They're not scared of being kicked out of the country. I really don't see them getting a hold on this, no matter what Keir Starmer says. And he really showed how insanely out of touch he is when a couple of days ago he spoke at the liaison committee and said that there's plenty of housing to put these people in. I mean, are you joking? Have you spoken to somebody who has been waiting for social housing for years and years and years? Have you spoken to someone who can barely even manage to pay their rent each month? You've got Serco offering people rent about 20% above market rates, and no worry about the tenant not paying either, because you've got 5 years guaranteed rent. The repairs are all going to be done. I mean, as much as I want to be angry with landlords for accepting this offer and helping the government do this and evict people, you can see why, if you're a landlord, you would, right?
No, exactly. Look, I actually, to back you up, I know developers in Stoke-on-Trent who have actually said no, but are in the middle of building complexes, not finished, just building them. And they were approached by Serco. They didn't go to Serco. Serco came to them and saying a 5 to 10 year contract that they said normally when they build, it's 12 years if it's fully let for that entire time to repay the cost of building, developing and any loans that they've taken out. They said if I took that deal, it would have taken 5 years and I would have been 6 years better in the pocket financially. So like you say, I don't blame some people thinking this could be my retirement fund, but the fact Serco are actively going out to seek landlords who are not seeking them, I think sends a big worrying sign. There's another story as well today with our friends in The Sun who led the campaign to point out the fact that, guess what? In these illegal migrant hotels, we've got people working as delivery drivers for Deliveroo, Justy and other brands too. Finally, the government, after initially saying no, has now said they are going to share where migrant hotel data is with these companies in order for them to be able to monitor and crack down on potential illegal use. It's taken a national newspaper to shame the government into taking action. Is this, though, a welcome step? Should we be congratulating the Labour government on it? And is this an important breakthrough, or will there still be problems?
I think, several questions there. So, first of all, we should congratulate the Labour government for doing something, but most of all, we should be congratulating The Sun. They've done some brilliant journalism here, and I think this government is pretty useless at most things, but the few times they've been pushed into taking action on something is when a journalist has really exposed what is going on. I think a lot of what has pushed Keir Starmer to try and make some deals with the French and the Germans to try and sort out the migrant crisis is because we have had a whole flurry of journalists going out there to France and showing the crazy situations that are going on, where the French are just standing back, hanging out in these beach buggies that we've paid for, whilst watching all the migrants get on the boat.
Chloe, we did get that great video, didn't we? Just before Monsieur Macron came into our shores, of puncturing boats in the water. That just happened to be a BBC film crew at the same time that was going on. But again, ironic, isn't it, that since Mr Macron's visit here, we've seen no more video footage of such things.
Yeah, I think that the French police, when a camera comes out, they very much put on a show. I mean, I know this. I was out there with Channel 4 last year, and the police, they're all ready to give us a show. They got their tear gas out and they slashed one of the boats and acted all tough. But we know as soon as the cameras aren't rolling, they're not interested. And these French police, they are paid off. They are bribed by the mafia. That is partly why these crossings are so expensive, is because so much of that money is being given to police, to coast guards, to politicians to bribe them to turn a blind eye to what is going on. On the question of will there still be trouble if we crack down on Deliveroo? Absolutely. I mean, The Sun, the brilliant journalism that they've been doing lately, they've just discovered that a couple were found filming OnlyFans content in their hotel room to make some cash. And they also spoke to some hotel managers who said that you have people, for example, stealing the freebies, like the free food and whatnot, hoarding it in their rooms, going out and selling it on the streets. You had one person steal the Hoover from the hotel and then take it down to the local shop to flog it. They've got the car washes, there's all sorts of mischief that this lot are up to.
Well, fantastic introduction so far. Thank you, Chloe. And she will be with us in the next segment where we're going to be talking about the fact that doctors are choosing to go on strike for 5 days this week because they want a 29% pay rise on top of the 22% pay rise this Labour government already gave them. And we'll be asking Chloe, does she care about the Conservative Party reshuffle? Does it mean a great deal? Am I maybe the one of only 100 people in the entire country who tuned in to find out who's now the Shadow Health Secretary? We'll see you after the break.
In that list that is being held up as the reason why our social fabric is fraying is the direct responsibility of the dreadful policies this government is making.
Well, those are their policies, the deindustrialisation. Those are their policies. So they're going, oh, look, here's a list of our policies that are causing societal decay.
Yes.
I mean, why don't you stop those policies? Why don't you do something that's good for this country? Honestly, Alex, you can't get your head around what's going on.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's me, Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for the great Ian Collins today. And in the studio, I'm delighted to be joined by my guest, Chloe Dobbs, the political commentator, who will be going through some more stories. But before we get, I just thought I'd share a text here from Mike in Sussex, who has a 6-point plan on how to fix Britain. 1, control mass uncontrolled immigration. 2, reduce bills. That includes energy, food, council tax, fuel and other utilities. 3, end unfairness. Those that work seem to be unfairly impacted. 4, fix health care. Doctors are too slow and dentists are too expensive. 5, get tough on law and order. It's a criminal safe haven out there. And 6, he says maybe this should be 1, Labour have to go and introduce proportional representation. Okay, Mike, well, there we go. We've got your plan. If you're planning to run, Mike, we'll look for your literature in the coming days ahead. But you can make sure you call us on 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk to start your message to 87222 and follow us on and message us on X at talkTV. Please make sure you do get in touch with our question of the day, which is simple. How do we repair Britain's broken social fabric? We had a good chat in the first segment there with Chloe. We now go back to her again on the next story, which is Wes Streeting's very, very cross. He tried all the social media videos he could. He's tried to get round the table. To be fair, he has appeared to be proactive. I think he was even briefing an idea where he'd reduce the pension contribution made, but that would enable a pay increase that would not require new money. An idea out the box, something that I think is certainly worth considering. But he is obviously, understandably, furious, and the public are furious as well, at reckless NHS doctors who are going to spend 5 days on strike, showing a complete disdain for patients, operations cancelled. And this is all over the fact that after Labour came in and gave their £9.5 billion public sector pay rise straight off the bat, having told us there's a £22 billion black hole they didn't know how to fill, that they've and which was therefore equated to a 22% pay rise for doctors. Doctors have said, no, that's not enough. We need another 29%. Do you think there's going to be much sympathy out there for doctors this time?
I don't think so. I mean, people are absolutely furious, and I understand why Wes Streeting would be furious, because I think he's one of the only people in Cabinet that I've got some time for. I think a lot of people recognise, he seems like he's got his head screwed on more than the rest of them, and he seems to be willing to try some innovative ideas to try and sort out the NHS, or at least make some progress on it. And he has started to make some progress on some things. I mean, the waiting lists, they are starting to come down a bit. They're still much higher than pre-pandemic levels, but he's excited to crack on. And then this is just an absolute nightmare. I mean, this will make the waiting list skyrocket up again, having more and more appointments and operations cancelled. And they got the highest pay rise of all the public sector workers. They got a huge pay increase. And I understand they may say this isn't in line with what we earned in real terms in 2008, and there is a chance that some of them, they're going to go off to work in Australia instead. I get that, but be realistic, people, and also recognise you're not just working any job. You are working a job where patients' lives and well-being is reliant on you turning up to work. This doesn't come with no consequences. And I think that I understand that doctors, they train for a very long time. They have huge student debts and whatnot to qualify to get to that position. But also, one of the reasons why you go into that job is to help people and to protect people's lives. I think that just walking out wanting another huge pay rise after you had 22% and then another 5.4% just kind of says to the public, we don't care about your health and well-being. There will be people who have waited ages and ages and ages for some operation who are going to find out that it's cancelled this week, who are just going to have absolutely no sympathy whatsoever. We're in a situation where you've got more and more people asking for more and more money from the state, whether it's for jobs, whether it's for benefits, or whatever it is. But we cannot keep going down this road of keep taxing, keep spending, keep taxing, keep spending. The economy's, shrinking or not growing very much at all. We need to start growing the economy first, and then when tax receipts go up, maybe in a few years' time, you can ask for another pay rise and we'll see if it's possible. But for now, it's just completely unfathomable.
For those economists, it's almost like we need a President Millet kind of approach, where he did very honestly say to the public that he was going to make some dramatic spending cuts in order to get finances back under control. A lot of people said this would bring Argentina to its knees, and lo and behold, they've had consecutive months of budget surpluses, economic growth at around 5%, and they think poverty did tick up initially to around 50%, now down to 33% within a year, and obviously steadily declining further. More rents prices down due to deregulating that market, and obviously opening himself up for a more free trading nation. I think it is about politicians just being brave enough to be honest with the trade-offs. I mean, to say here, we've got polling in The Sun today that says that the public, only 33% of the public are now backing the doctor strikes. That's down from 40% when previously polled in May. And Mr. Wes Streeting here, the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, quoted in The Sun as saying, after a 28.9% pay hike in the last 3 years and the highest pay rise in the public sector 2 years in a row, strike action shows a complete disdain for patients and the recovery of the NHS. And like you, I have a lot of time for Wes Streeting. I think a lot of people didn't think Labour ministers would be willing to be quite so punchy in their language when it came to dealing with the trade unions. But I think it also just goes to show that when Labour were harping on from the sidelines in opposition at the Tory, then Conservative-led government about, oh, just get round the table and negotiate, it isn't always that simple.
No, it's not, especially when you're dealing with the BMA, who they just can't negotiate, they can't find a middle ground. They're just like, give us this huge pay rise or else we're just going to strike the whole time. I think it's pretty abhorrent what they're doing to patients by not just accepting the huge pay rise that they have already got. Wes Streeting, understandably furious. And the thing is Wes Streeting has said you're harming this fixing of the NHS that we're trying to do. And whenever I speak to the few doctors I know, it seems like their biggest qualm with their job is not their pay packet, but it's the fact that when they go to work, they're all running around like headless chickens, insanely stressed, working way too many hours, and that the system is just so broken that it makes their jobs a nightmare. If they worked with Wes Streeting to help get the NHS back in line, bring the waiting lists down and whatnot, that would probably make their jobs better than a pay packet increase, in my opinion.
No, I think you're right. And before we go to the break, obviously yesterday we had this shadow government reshuffle, should I say. Kemi Badenoch announcing a sort of a new lineup. The big announcement being James Cleverly, leadership contender against Miss Badenoch last summer, is come back from the backbenches. He's now going to be opposite Anne Gerena as the Shadow Secretary of State for Communities, Housing and Local Government. And he's already having quite an interesting time. Mr Cleverly's been out on the airwaves today and he's been trying to explain how he has previously said, only as last week, that he did not think leaving the ECHR was some sort of silver bullet. He previously, when he ran for the leadership, said that he don't think we need to leave the ECHR at all. Kemi Badenoch has obviously got this review underway to launch by the time of Tory party conference to say whether or not the party will adopt what it now essentially is reforms policy of leaving the European Convention of Human Rights. Is this just going to end in disaster? Because Mr Cleverly's saying that if the decision comes back that we should, he will abide by it. But abiding by something doesn't sound like he believes in it. And when the Conservative Party is trying to rebuild trust, it's going to be hard for the public to believe someone who's been so openly opposed to leaving will actually do it if push came to shove and he were in power.
Yeah, it's like when, as we've tried to in the past, have Remainers running the show when we're trying to leave the European Union, and they say, oh yes, we're going to honour the result of the vote, but they don't properly believe in it, they don't completely understand what the public want out of it. I think there are going to be a lot of people who are concerned that this is the Tory party moving more to the centre, not addressing not being bold enough on immigration. But on the other hand, there will be people saying, oh, you win from the centre. I know George Osborne, after the general election, was advising them you need to move back to the centre, and you can't really out Farage, so maybe copying reform isn't the trick that they want to try. The one upshot of this is that James Cleverly, he is quite a good communicator, and so having him rolled out, going on the airwaves as he has been doing, might be a bit of a good look for the party. But I think it is shuffling chairs around on the Titanic, let's be honest.
Well, thank you so much to Chloe Dodds, political commentator, for joining us here in our first half an hour. And we've gone through the big stories of the day, and we want you to tell us what you think. So that is calling us on 0344 499 1000. Text in with the word talk at the start of your message to 87222 and follow us and message us on X at talkTV. We'll see you after the break.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's me, Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for the great Ian Collins here on the home of Common Sense. That is Talk. It is 33 minutes past 1 o'clock this afternoon. We are awaiting that press conference to take place in Essex, where we will find out why on earth Essex police were transporting Antifa protesters into the by the Bell Hotel, where obviously we then saw civil unrest take place after some far-right thugs and, of course, these pro-migrant Antifa protesters clashed. That does not mean the majority of those people went there with that intent. Of course, there were many law-abiding citizens simply wanting to have their voice heard. And I'm hoping we'll be joined by Theo Usherwood after that press conference to learn more from him. But before we get there, let's go to Associate Editor of The Daily Sceptic, Laurie Westall, who is joining us down the line. Hey, Laurie, how are you doing?
Great to be here, Jonathan. Yes, I'm good, thanks.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on the airwaves today. Now, look, we've obviously had this amazing conversion, it seems, of this Labour government, where they're now talking about the need to repair the social fabric or risk a repeat of the summer riots. This comes after Angela Rayner's comments in the Cabinet on Tuesday were briefed out that she was saying that the country is on the verge of civil unrest. Ironically, 24 hours after Nigel Farage had already said the same thing, and he was being poo-pooed as stoking division and fear. What's your take on the situation? Is Epping just the epicentre of where we think British public mood is right now?
Absolutely, I think it is. I mean, we've already seen there's been these protests in Epping last week. They continued on multiple occasions. There was one significant one on Sunday, but now that has moved to another asylum hotel in Canary Wharf, of all places. You'd think that would be a very strange place, that, you know, high-flying financial district, to be putting a load of asylum seekers, but nevertheless, that's where they are. And there's been a suggestion, it's not been confirmed, that actually some asylum seekers may have been moved from Epping to Canary Wharf, and that's why the protests are spreading. But frankly, Jonathan, this kind of situation of asylum seekers being in communities that they shouldn't be, this is happening all over the country, and people have existing grievances, and it really will not take much of a spark to set off these kinds of protests, because frankly, people are very angry.
The hotel in Canary Wharf, as you say, I've seen amazing footage, again, unverified at this moment in time, but footage that is showing guests that were turning up to the hotel to check in, being turned away, even late in the night, without giving any explanation. I think what scared people with the Canary Wharf hotel situation is seemingly how quick this hotel was almost just taken over or commandeered by the government in order to house, as you say, migrants, and how quickly those people who'd paid their money in order to stay there were just being turfed away.
Indeed, and what a stain on our reputation as a destination for tourists, for people coming here with their families, paying perhaps for an expensive holiday. I mean, this is a nice hotel, yeah, and yet suddenly they're being potentially turfed out, or certainly they will not be having a nice holiday experience in a hotel like this, when there's protests outside, and when potentially the people they're rubbing up against are potentially unvetted. We don't really know where they've come from, and as we know, they are liable to commit sex attacks at times, as the people of Epping are so angry about.
And do you think, in terms of the protests, some people would say that those who are anti, obviously, the small boats, people who are protesting in anger at hotels popping up, is it fair to suggest that people shouldn't be protesting outside hotels? It is emotive, it is evocative, it could easily be jumped upon by the far right and therefore lead to violence. Is there a better place for people to conduct these protests instead of outside the migrant hotels themselves?
No, certainly not. I think these are the site of the grievance, and provided they remain peaceful, which I think it's important to point out, by and large they have, and indeed even Essex police last Thursday admitted that those protesters that gathered there on Thursday originally were legitimately protesting and were peaceful. And so these are the well-founded concerns. These are not far-right people. You've got an image there of Protect Our Kids and various middle-class families, essentially, and children as well, who are coming to these demonstrations. Let's remember. And this is not thuggery. These are local people with with real concerns, and that's really important to mention. But as for whether these have devolved into violence, there are these really enormous questions over Essex police now, because firstly, they denied that they had essentially brought these left-wing protesters into the middle of that protest. And it was only after this, let's remember, that the things started kicking off. And now they've had to admit that they did, in fact, do that. So, to put the blame on the communities here for this unrest and some of the violent scenes we saw, I think is wrong, because frankly, the police have a lot of explaining to do.
And final one from me, Laurie, if I may, is just to understand, how do you think we go about repairing the social fabric of this country? What does this government need to do if it is to avoid a summer of rioting?
Well, I think we've seen in that briefing from Angela Rayner that you mentioned a lot of talk about, as you say, the social fabric and sort of people's lives in communities and things like this. But I think, frankly, this is just a way of not really looking at the issue. The issue is a very clear and simple political issue, which is people do not want these unvetted foreign young men in their communities. And frankly, they shouldn't be in any communities up and down the country. They should either be in a secure camp somewhere, or really they should be deported. That is what people want. That is the one thing that the government could do to get a grip on this and to stop the anger. And the more they talk about community hubs or the social fabric or anything else, this is just a way of avoiding the issue and not getting on with the job that the British public want them to do.
Well, look, Laurie Wastel there, Associate Editor of the Daily Skeptic. Thank you so much for joining us here on Talk Today. And we go to our next guest, which is the newly appointed Shadow Secretary of State for Department of Science, Innovation and Technology, a former colleague of mine, Julia Lopez MP, who represents Hornchurch and Upminster. Hello, Julia, how are you?
Hi, Jonathan. I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. And thank you for joining us here on the Home of Common Sense, that is Talk. Now, Julia, obviously, there's been a lot of talk this week about law and order in this country, a lot of scenes outside the hotel in Epping. I think your constituency isn't too far away from where some of these migrant hotel protests have been taking place. Can I just get asked, first of all, for the Conservative position about the protests and what the view is regarding whether or not those protests should be allowed to take place or not outside these migrant hotels?
Well, look, my constituency, Hornchurch and Upminster, is effectively East London and Essex combined. It's not far from where this is taking place. You've just been talking about the Canary Wharf Hotel. And the fact that these hotels are being stood up at such short order, I think, is a sign that the government has effectively lost control of the borders. What happens is large numbers of people arrive each day, and there's a team in the Home Office that has to effectively scrabble together some accommodation for these people. And when there is none, they have to set up completely unsuitable places for people to go. And that's effectively what has happened here. And people are rightly very, very concerned about this. Obviously, there should be no violence when it comes to protest. That is not what we are about as a country. Everybody knows that. That goes without saying. However, there is a very legitimate concern about the arrival of people that we don't know who they are, going into communities that are not used to this kind of thing, dealing with legitimate concerns in relation to crime. The issue in Epping was sparked by the fact that charges have been brought against a man who was sexually harassing a young girl. And these are legitimate concerns. And I think that, all this talk about community cohesion, the bottom line is this is about the fact that the government has no grip on the border. Small boat arrivals have gone up 40% in the time that Labour has been in office. There's been 23,000 people arriving so far this year. And you and I know, Jonathan, that they have effectively removed some of the accommodation options that we had stood up, whether that's the Bibby Stockholm, whether that's looking at some of the military encampments that people were looking at. And that means there's just not the right accommodation there to house these people, and they are not doing anything on deportations. They've talked... Sorry, John.
No, sorry, I was about to say, so the Conservative policy would be essentially at this moment in time to bring back those kind of Bibby Stockholm accommodation or Army and RAF bases that are no longer used in order to house illegal migrants there, rather than using hotels, which the Labour government has said they will empty by 2029.
Well, no, I mean, that's a second order issue. The number one issue is how to deport people. And we put forward a deportation bill, which would effectively apply the Human Rights Act to people who have arrived here illegally and seek to immediately deport them. And, we're looking at every avenue to do that. And I don't see that there's any solution that Labour have put forward that fundamentally deals with this. And I think it effectively shows what a facade the Stop the Gangs policy is. It is a fig leaf in the absence of a serious policy that deals with deportation.
And with regards to the scenes that we've seen, video footage that Nigel Farage is promoting on his X account today that shows police officers were bussing in the Antifa and Stand Up to Racism protesters to the Bell Hotel in Epping, where obviously we saw those ghastly scenes then unfold later on between far-right thugs and the far-left protesters. Do you think he's called for the resignation of the Chief Constable of Essex Police? Do you agree with him?
Look, there are various different contradictory accounts as to what's happened, and I think as we speak, Essex Police are giving out a press conference on this. So I simply don't want to speculate. There is a lot of concern about what's going on. It's a very difficult situation to police. So without having the full facts, I don't want to particularly speculate. We saw what happens when there is that level of speculation. The key in these sorts of situations is to be as open and transparent about what is going on as possible, to try and stand back and not stir the pot and try and calm things down. But not to try and put people in a box and say, well, what you're doing in terms of protest is not legitimate. Notwithstanding the fact that if there is violence, then that's not acceptable.
The challenge would be, obviously, that when the Conservative Party was in power, over 100,000 people did arrive by small boats. Labour government inherited this situation. Do you accept that the Conservative Party, therefore, has some blame in the fact that there is anger out there in the public about hotels still remaining and small boat migrants being able to roam the streets, work illegally and indeed commit crime and sexual offences, as Baroness Casey in her audit pointed out, who are now taking more and more in part in child rape gangs?
It cannot be denied that we made mistakes on immigration policy. I think we recognise those mistakes and we are trying to rectify them in everything that we are doing. We also, as I said before, were stopping the hotels. We had closed down a number of them, and we were putting together a policy which would have seen the offshore processing of a number of these migrants. And that is the difference. I mean, Labour has no appetite to deal with this issue. They are trying to pretend that they do, but they don't. And I think everybody instinctively understands that. And as I say, in the absence of there being a proper policy, they are sort of looking the other way. And in the meantime, the country's getting very, very concerned about where things are going.
And what do you say back to Keir Starmer, who at the liaison committee this week claimed that local authorities have plenty of housing to house illegal migrants in order to empty hotels? Is that the case in your constituency?
No, and I think this is one of the issues. It leads to this sense of injustice and unfairness. There isn't the housing stock. I mean, nobody can pretend that there isn't a challenge in terms of the housing capacity in this country. And therefore, people feel that if you arrive uninvited and are suddenly given accommodation, and that's a great cost to the taxpayer, there's a deep sense of unfairness and injustice, and that's also something that is leading to this level of concern.
And obviously, just to go on to another story, which was obviously you were appointed to the Shadow Cabinet yesterday. Congratulations, as the Shadow Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology, along with a few others. First of all, how do you feel being back in a brief I think that you have had experience of before?
Yeah, I was the Minister for Telecoms previously, so it's great to be back in this brief, and I look forward to scrutinising the government. But I think one of the most interesting appointments that Kemi made yesterday was of Neil O'Brien, who is one of the deepest thinkers when it comes to things like immigration policy. And it shows that the Conservatives will be thinking about how to put forward comprehensive policy solutions to some of the deepest challenges. This is not just reactionary politics. This is how do we deal with some of the very deep-seated problems that our country faces and be ready in time for the next general election to provide proper solutions to the people who so desperately want to see that.
Does Neil O'Brien's appointment over policy mean that these policy commissions are kind of effectively defunct? They don't actually mean anything, they're more theatre than actual substance? Or is Neil overseeing those alongside Alex Burkhart, the Shadow Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, as well, I think the Shadow Secretary of State for the Cabinet Office too?
I know the policy commissions are very much live. I mean, we are trying to get the greatest expertise from across the country, bringing people into the party who would not normally consider voting Conservative but are expert in their fields, bringing Conservatives in and trying to get that breadth of knowledge and experience so that, as I say, we come up with policies that will actually deliver. I think, understandably, there's a lot of cynicism from the public in politicians right now, and we have to be the people that provide those solutions at the time of the general election.
Now, some people are criticising Kemi Badenoch one, that she said that there would be no reshuffle until the before the general election, when initially assembling the shadow cabinet that we've had before. We see quite a damning piece in the New Statesman today, a long read that suggests that not all is not well, and there was lots of grumbling and moaning behind the scenes. And in fact, Richard Holden, the recently now appointed Shadow Secretary of State for Transport, allegedly told a group of party members that the old shadow cabinet was full of a group of, quote, non-entities. Have you and Richard been brought in because the non-entities were simply not up to the job?
I don't think so. I mean, Richard is a great communicator, and he also has experience as the former roads minister. He understands retail politics and what people are looking for, and he is willing to go out there and have a good go at the Labour government. And I think that's what we as opposition have to do. They are failing as a government, and it's our job to hold them to account and to do so ferociously, because what they're doing to this country is extremely worrying.
Do you think there's been slacking from shadow cabinet ministers? Do you think too much has been left for Kemi Badenoch to have to pick up and do, and then other ministers like Robert Jenrick have been busy sort of doing their own piece? Is it time for more of a collective effort? Is this team that's now been assembled the team that's going to really reinvigorate and take the fight back both to Labour and Reform UK?
Well, look, the cabinet was one that was put together after a very serious electoral defeat. And so this is not about any single individual. This is about how we as a party collectively regroup, get ourselves out of the government mindset and start attacking the government. And as I say, that is a big job to do. And we have to do it fiercely and ferociously, because what they're doing is ruining our country.
Thank you so much, Julie Lopez, for joining us today. That Julie Lopez, the Member of Parliament for Hornchurch and Upminster, and the Shadow Secretary of State for Science, Innovation and Technology. Well, listeners, tell us what you think about what's just been said. Call us 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK to start your message to 87222. And you can also follow us on X at talkTV. There are scenes now on the camera, if you're watching, that show the press conference of Essex Police underway to explain what took place in Epping and whether or not people were being bussed in. We have Theo Usherwood on the ground, and once that press conference is finished, we hope to come and bring you the live update of what's been said shortly. We'll see you after the break.
It's going to be a very, very difficult summer. I think the Chancellor, along with her advisors, will be weighing up all those options before the autumn budget. And as what she herself said the other week, that the low-hanging fruit, those sort of easy pickings that when she came into office to try and raise some money, whether it was the national insurance hike on business, there's only so many times you can go back to the well on that, because confidence in the business community has been hit by that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, Britain. This is Talk. This is the home of common sense, and I'm Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for the great Ian Collins. And we want to make sure that you stay in touch with what we're doing on the show. So call in to 0344 499 1000. Text in the word Talk to start your message to 87222, or follow us and message us on X at talkTV so we can hear what you have to say. Just so you know, we have live scenes right now of Ben Julian Harrington, the Chief Constable of Essex Police, who has so far said the following in his press conference: "We police according to the law as it is, not how people want it to be." He's confirmed that 10 people have been arrested, saying what has been unacceptable has been the people who have come to Epping and committed violence, who have attacked people who work at the hotel, who have attacked officers, who have damaged property, and who have caused fear and disruption to the people of Epping, without actually, may I just say, pointing out who he's referring to. And he also has said so far, "I also want to be really, really clear. It is not for Essex Police to make judgment about asylum or immigration policy. That is for the government. It is for Essex Police and the police more generally to make sure that people can go about their rights and business lawfully." He's still speaking. We're going to tune in just for a little bit so we can hear what's being said live right now.
Of course, where people break the law and that there is a clear breach of law, we will investigate those matters.
And what do you say to parents in Epping who are taking their children out of the town this coming weekend in anticipation of further violence?
Well, I mean, that's the point I want to make around this. Is about the people of Epping first and foremost.
What do you say to those parents?
Well, I say to those parents, we'll have a robust policing operation. Essex is safe. You will have hundreds of officers on duty. We are working with local communities, with our local community groups, with the local authority. We've got local officers who are deployed even now and this week, working with parents, working with communities to make sure that people can feel assured. I want the people of Essex to Epping to understand that it is exactly that concern, that disruption, that fear that is at the heart of what we're trying to achieve. If you remember, that's where I started this press conference.
One at a time. Can we get to the gentleman in the red tie? Thank you. Charlie Peters, GB News. Your colleague Stuart Hooper said, in terms of bringing people to the hotel, the police have a duty to facilitate free assembly. The force initially said that they didn't bring anyone to the hotel, but your colleague seems to suggest that that had happened after footage emerged. Can you set the record straight then? Was Stuart wrong when he said that?
Under the law of this country as it stands, people have the freedom to assembly and to freedom of speech.
So your officers did bring people towards that hotel?
Listen to my answer. That is there is a duty upon policing to allow people to exercise their rights of assembly and protest. That's a right of this country, under the Human Rights Act. People came to that of their own volition. They walked up to that protest in order to ensure that we understand the threat, manage and deal with the risks and the issues. As we did outside the hotel, as we did in the high street, we had officers there and they would have walked alongside to make sure that they understand, can intervene and prevent and detect crime. That's what happened, that's what the photos show, and that's what we did.
Was there no thought about keeping the groups further away?
There we have some of the words being said there, with a question that the Chief Constable of Essex Police has, Ben Julian Harrington, has basically admitted that the police did indeed protect and escort those who wanted to protest against the anti-migrant protesters, the Antifa, Stand Up to Racism, many of whom would have been balaclavaed up, many of whom would seek to actually stoke division in order to get ugly scenes taking place on our streets. We're escorting them to the Bell Hotel in Epping. I don't know how that's going to go down with the general public. I think the Chief Constable should have a much better answer than that. Let's go to a caller, Ian, who's from London. Ian, how are you doing?
Not bad, Jonathan, not bad.
Ian, what's your view?
I've got 2 points, if I can get them through quickly. One with what that Chief Inspector, was it, just said?
Yep.
Yeah? He's now sort of saying that they're doing all this job. Who's paying for all of that? Is it coming from the money that we were going to give to France to stop the immigrants, or is it more money that they've got to find from somewhere else?
It will probably be coming in from policing budgets. It will not be, I suspect, additional money. They may apply for extraordinary funding, but I suspect that's coming out of Essex Police's own budget, aka your taxes.
Yes, so basically they're going to be even more shorter. They won't be able to employ more policemen because they've got to pay for all of this.
Yes.
So policing goes out the window.
Yes, less police will be on the streets around Essex because they'll be aware the protests are. I mean, do you think that protesting outside hotels is right and proper? Should we not be allowing that to happen?
I think quite simply, if you're a parent, OK, I'm not, and you're worried about your children's safety, you would have to make some sort of stand to say we don't want it on our front doorstep.
And so you would be sympathetic to those who did go and peacefully protest to raise their concerns in order to get their government, their police force, to take the issue more seriously.
Yeah, but this goes back to my second point, where we talk about Captain Flip-Flop in Starmer.
Yes.
We've actually got the evil witch from Snow White, like Snow White, in Angela Rayner. She changes outfit, but on clown shoes that she sometimes wears, that quite simply she changes every day. 1 minute wants to stop Islamophobia, the next day she wants to sort of like do something else, the next day she wants to do something. The woman is incompetent, and if you had her as Prime Minister, which she's angling for, right, would be in an even worse position. She doesn't know, and I think it was your guest Chloe earlier on,
yes,
said that she is terrible. She will put us into a worse position. I think at the moment, the trouble is we've got a parliament that the major party, they've got to be either ostriches because they just stick their head in the sand and don't want to see anything, or they're going to be turkeys voting for Christmas by having a general election. And you know, and I know, if they can get away without having a general election, they'll go back to being ostriches.
Ian, that was an amazing call. Thank you so much, Ian from London there, sharing his thoughts. And Angela Rayner, indeed, let's not forget, a big Corbyn ally during Jeremy Corbyn's leadership of the Labour Party, now suddenly very much saying that we need to worry about the social cohesion of this country, saying that we should remove benefits for migrants for a certain number of years. It is a very dramatic change in tone. Indeed, we've had lots of you texting in as well. We've got here, doctors work in a broken system. Money in their pocket doesn't fix that. We've also got, sadly, the country now isn't the one I grew up in and is totally unrecognisable, which leaves me thinking, actually, I'd rather live somewhere else. I'd employ a dozen people. How many more like me feel this way? Another one, scrap the 2010 Equalities Act, the Human Rights Act, and every other government policy that has any of Blair's fingerprints over it. That's from Michael. And James, so the police can't even tell the time now, Essex Police. Said the press conference was at 1:15 p.m. How can we trust a word they say? That's a criticism about the delay there from Essex Police. Another one from Barry. Afternoon, Jonathan. Time to join Reform UK. The Tories are toast. Thank you, Barry, is a text I often get, as well as on social media platforms. And another one, Jonathan, there are loads of newly qualified doctors who can't get a job, so sack the strikers and give the jobs to the doctors who want to work. That's from Phil. Well, you know how they get in touch with us. 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK to start your message to 87222 and follow us on Talk on @TalkTV on X.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is the home of common sense. This is Talk, and I'm Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for the great Ian Collins today. And if you want to get in touch and tell us how you think we can repair the broken social fabric of Britain, you know what to do. Call us 0344 499 1000. Text in with your message starting with the word TALK to 87222, and follow us and message us on X at talkTV. Coming up, Nigel Farage has called for the resignation of the Chief Constable of Essex Police, with Reform UK leader calling footage of police officers escorting pro-migrant protesters to the hotel, quote, absolutely disgraceful. Police have confirmed 10 people have been arrested over the protests. There is still a live press conference going on right now. Theo Usherwood is on the scene, and when we get a chance, we will go down and hear what the Chief Constable has had to say. Meanwhile, it comes as 10 Downing Street is warning Britain must repair its fraying social fabric to avoid another summer of discontent amid fears of renewed unrest over migration. And Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch has dismissed talk of a coup, saying she's not paying attention to reports of backbench plots, just days after unveiling her revamped shadow cabinet. Well, you know what to do. Make sure you get in touch. And I'm delighted to say, joining me in the studio is friend of us here on Talk, political editor of Huffington Post UK, Mr. Kevin Schofield. Hey, Kevin, how are you?
I'm good, Jonathan. How are you?
I'm good. Let's get to the Kemi Badenoch first of all story. There was a big long read in the New Statesman today, which is, I've got to say, pretty damning. It looks into her background, her past, her history, which is, I think, questioned in terms of her ability at times, and questions how she even got to being on the Conservative front bench. But actually, more importantly, has said that the Kemi Badenoch that people thought they were going to get has completely evaporated. She looks like the job is too big for her. Her own allies think that maybe it's got above her, and that this reshuffle is just shuffling the decks on the Titanic.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a gamble, isn't it, when you reshuffle? I mean, if you do it from a position of weakness, it looks like panic. And if it is underwhelming, as I think yesterday's was, people are left shrugging their shoulders and saying, well, what was the point of that? Now, the big story they wanted to come out of it, obviously, was James Cleverly coming back, which, I think is a good move for the Conservatives. He was out on the media round this morning, and straight away you can tell, he's a class performer, he's a very good communicator, something I think that they've lacked since Kemi became leader. But that aside, it was a pretty underwhelming reshuffle.
Yeah, if I may, Kevin, so we saw your namesake, Kevin Hollinrake, who's a lovely guy, but now the chairman of the Conservative Party. And whilst I say I know Kevin personally and like him as a person, I think many in Westminster do, yeah, he's not exactly screaming the face of a renewed Conservative Party.
No, you're right, and absolutely the health one here is he is a very nice guy. No one's got a bad word to say about Kevin Hollinrake, really. But when you think of, I think the Conservatives, certainly more than Labour, the job of chairman was always a big job. You were the chief organiser, the chief campaigner.
And recently Lord Tebbit, who just passed, being one of the big beasts of when you had party chairman in those significant roles.
Absolutely, and for various reasons the Tories have churned through quite a lot of chairmen.
I think it's 10 now in 5 years, I think we're on.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible, really. And they went initially with the co-chairman, which is she had two doing the job. That clearly didn't work. So they've given it to Kevin Hollinrake, another one of the few who's really trusted by Kemi Badenoch to actually go on television. So he's got that in his favour. But yeah, you can't see him really being able to rally many former Tories who have gone to reform back to the Conservative standard, can you really? So it was a bit of an odd one, I think.
And there's also a lot of talk, as you say, with James Cleverly, whilst a very good communicator, and I think doesn't come across as odd, which I think is the key in Westminster, where, if I'm quite brutal, Kemi Badenoch has come across as odd. I think I asked a few friends who aren't into politics what they know about Kemi, and they said that she doesn't seem to like maternity pay. Yeah. She thinks lunch is woke, and if she does, it's a steak. I mean, these are people not tuning in, but that's what they know of her. I mean, James Cleverly does have that going for him, which is obviously he does come across as a man you can have a pint down the pub with. But on the media round, he was getting quite a big grilling over his view on the European Convention of Human Rights. He very openly in the summer last year, competing for leadership, said we didn't need to leave it. Last week he was saying it's not the silver bullet, which many I'm sure would rightly say is indeed just being honest with the great British public. And he has subsequently now said that if the review that Kemi Badenoch has asked for says that we should leave the ECHR, he would abide by the decision. But when you're trying to come across as authentic and trying to get people who have looked at reform and trust them to come back to you and say, if we were in power, we would, I promise you, leave the ECHR, it doesn't scream confidence.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't make you think that it's his authentic view. He was asked repeatedly this morning, do you agree with what Kemi Badenoch has said, which is that she is moving towards effectively leaving the ECHR. She's not made up her mind. That's why she's got this commission, as you said, looking into it. But that seems to be one of many. But that seems to be her direction of travel. And he was asked repeatedly, do you agree with that? And he wouldn't say that he did. So already there's a bit of a split there. And you're right, this is a bit of a touchstone issue, ECHR membership, for a lot of former Conservative voters who have switched to Reform. They know exactly where Nigel Farage stands on it. They sort of have an idea of where Kemi Badenoch is heading towards, but clearly, as you say, James Cleverly has made it pretty clear that he is not in favour of it. And
obviously we saw, I think, the story that many viewers and listeners understandably would go by, and it'll be Westminster nerds like us, Kevin, who would see it. So Lee Rowley, a former colleague of mine, a former Member of Parliament, and literally the right-hand man politically of Kemi Badenoch, he was appointed her Chief of Staff, and the shock news was that he has left as Chief of Staff to go and work in the private sector. Henry Newman, who is seen as a very close ally of Michael Gove, and indeed also a very good friend of Carrie Johnson, Boris Johnson's wife, has been promoted to the Chief of Staff role. Francis Maude, who seems to never go missing when it comes to helping opposition figure out how to become government, also a very big Michael Gove ally, and supposedly a very big supporter of Kemi Badenoch. He was, it said in the New Statesman, crucial to her being able to get on the candidates list and finding a seat, is sort of advising the leader of the opposition. People are saying this is actually the Michael Gove takeover. And in WhatsApp groups that I'm in with many party members in different parts of the country, I will say this, about 2/3 of the comments are saying this is the takeover of the Wets, this is the Conservative Party pivoting to Lib Dems, not understanding that it's got the issue on its right flank and therefore is abandoning a whole host of voters and members in the process.
Yeah, that was certainly the feedback I was getting from a lot of MPs yesterday. Those who are, you would say, on the wet end of the spectrum.
Your One Nation Conservatives, as
One
it's
Nation
known,
Conservatives, they were very happy with it, so which I think speaks volumes. And it is interesting, isn't it, that Michael Gove, he's no longer an MP. He is in the House of Lords, although his day job is editor of The Spectator, so you don't really see him around Westminster anymore. And yet, you know, he's still got his finger in so many pies. We know he was a big supporter of Kemi Badenoch. When she initially went for the leadership the last time, and she was unsuccessful on that occasion, he supported her. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. It's not that surprising, I guess, that he would be heavily involved in someone that she would lean on. He's got a lot of experience, a lot of cabinet experience, but he's a very divisive character as well, and a lot of people I think will probably take ill to the idea that Michael Gove, even though he's no longer an MP or near the Tory front bench, is still pulling the strings.
Quite helpfully for Richard Holden today, who's now the Shadow Secretary of State for Transport, the New Statesman piece suggests that very recently he was saying that the old cabinet, Shadow Cabinet, was full of, quote, non-entities, alleged, again, as I say in the New Statesman, that this was said to party members. I'm assuming, was it a load of non-entities? Is Richard Holden actually a big beast, and so therefore Kemi Badenoch is going to be able to really take the fight to Labour now?
Well, he's a former chairman as well, isn't he? Another one, you know, we were just saying that 10 and 5 years, so I'd almost forgotten about Richard Holden. So yeah, I wonder whether he has replaced one of the non-entities that he's talking about, because it might be a little bit awkward if he's sitting side by side with people who he's previously criticised. I think one of the other things actually about the reshuffle is that the big jobs, no one changed. Mel Stride is still Shadow Chancellor, Robert Jenrick, Chris Philp, Priti Patel, all the big ticket jobs didn't change either. So again, it's left a lot of people thinking.
Interesting that Robert Jenrick, as you say, has been kept put. There was a push, I believe, by allies of Robert Jenrick that he should replace Mel Stride as Shadow Chancellor. I suspect Kemi Badenoch felt like that was inviting the fox into their hen house somewhat.
Absolutely. I mean, we know that, I mean, it's an open secret, he's never denied it, that his leadership campaign hasn't really stopped. Even though he lost, he's still, you know, he veers outside his remit. You know, he's Shadow Justice Secretary, but, you know, he does those very good videos, you have to say, but they're not all about justice. He opines on Twitter, big, long, lengthy articles about the economy, about everything under the sun, basically, as if he was party leader, which obviously we know that he would dearly love to be.
And finally, do you think this will reassure maybe Conservative MPs who have been concerned? Do you think this, from the conversations you've had, as you say, the One Nation element of the party, some of whom would, accusations would be that that's a large cohort of the parliamentary party. Do you think that will stabilise things as we get through to party conference? Is Kemi Badenoch safe to her 1 year anniversary as leader? Or do you think once we hit that, there is a chance the knives will then come out?
I think there is a chance that the knives will definitely come out. She is safe under the Tory party rules and the 1922 committee rules that she can't be challenged within the first year. It would be in keeping, shall we say, with the Conservative Party over the last few years that they have gone through quite a lot of leaders. If the polls haven't improved, once we get through party conference, if party conference goes badly, shall we say, for
that's a real danger for Kemi,
then she's in an awful lot of trouble. Then there's a 6-month window basically between November and the local elections, and the question a lot of Conservative members and MPs in particular would ask themselves is, do we keep with Kemi, lead us to possibly another bad result in May, or do we cut our losses, get someone else in, potentially Robert Jenrick, and then take it from there?
Because people forget, don't they, that if they go backwards in Wales and in Scotland, that short money that the party is currently receiving disappearing. That is more foot soldiers for the ground game going as well. If you lose another 500 councillors out of 1,000 that are Conservative, I think that'll be around 3,500 councillors in the last 4 years that have been gone. Mood will be pretty low, and if the Conservatives still polling, as you say, in the teens percentage-wise, and Nigel Farage still leading many polls, you've got to wonder what might there be left to even revive of the Conservative Party?
Well, absolutely. I mean, if it was a poison chalice before, when Kemi took over after the general election, it could be even worse for whoever takes over from her.
And finally, Nigel Farage, do you think he'll be feeling threatened by James Cleverly as a communicator, or do you think he's not even bothering to look at who's the shadow cabinet right now because he feels he's in the driving seat?
Absolutely. I don't think he will be. He was very dismissive. He's very rude, actually, about James Cleverly, making fun of the fact he's called Cleverly and he's the MP for Braintree, hinting that that wasn't very appropriate for someone of his mental capacity, which I thought was pretty
bit Trumpian,
bit cheap. But he is cock of the walk right now as far as the right of British politics is concerned, and I don't think he really cares about what Kemi Badenoch is doing. She can have anyone on the front bench as far as he's concerned. He feels he can march on without any hindrance at all.
And talking about Nigel Farage, we've got this video clip from his X account today where he's been pretty aggressive about the Chief Constable of Essex Police, and in fact calling for him to resign and showing some footage that seems to imply protesters against the anti-migrant protesters, the Stamp to Racism and Antifa brigade, were being escorted by police in and out, and he's saying that it's them to blame. If we just quickly play the clip.
Have a look at this video.
If these are locals, why are they getting in a police car? Where time's the next bus? You wait 15 minutes for a bus and then 3 come all along at once. Look, they're all cramming in.
This shows stand up to racism, as they're called, with Antifa, a violent, thuggish group, arriving at the train station and literally, by Essex police, being bussed to the Bell Hotel. These were the people that caused the disturbances. These were the people that caused the riots. Essex police caused the disturbances. What on earth were Essex police thinking? Is it that they just hate so much ordinary residents determined to stand up for their own rights? I don't know the answer to that question. What I do know is what Essex police have done here is absolutely disgraceful.
That's a video from Nigel Farage's X account. Kevin, do you think it's just Nigel Farage again tapping into public mood? He obviously had his big announcement on Monday regarding some of the policies that he would enact 30,000 additional police officers, Nightingale prisons, and even threatening to deport people to El Salvador. Do you think this is just Nigel Farage being on the front foot again of public sentiment, or do you think he's stoking a bit of division and fear?
I think there is a little bit of that. I mean, I think we have to hear what the Chief Constable has to say in his defence. You know, on the face of it, it does seem strange if the police were indeed taking these protesters towards potentially trouble. You know, if there are protesters on the other side of the argument there as well.
And there most certainly were far-right lunatics who were seeking violence as well.
100%. And it would be very strange were the police to then physically take their opponents towards them. You think that might be a recipe for trouble. So we have to wait and see exactly what the Chief Constable has to say to explain himself. But yeah, again, this is what just mentioned, that this is an example of Nigel Farage being a perfect political communicator. He's so good at that. He communicates in ways the ordinary person in the street can understand. And again, I think you're right, he has got ahead of the mood of this, because interestingly he gave that big speech about the social cohesion falling down in Britain. That was on Monday. Then the following day, Angela Rayner was saying pretty much the same thing at the Cabinet. And interestingly, Number 10 briefed that out. Now, normally we get briefed very dull readouts from Cabinet, but actually this was actually quite punchy, and obviously Number 10 I think are a little bit concerned, obviously, that Nigel Farage is getting a lot of traction from this, and they wanted to get the message out there to the public that we're aware of it, we're discussing it, Angela Rayner is on it. So it's a very...
And it's interesting because there are some around Angela Rayner who have briefed that they're very unhappy that what she said was put out by Number 10, because ultimately she feels that she's sort of being used as some sort of Farage punch bag, as it were, when actually Keir Starmer did that interview did that big speech which he about Ireland is Strange, which he's now admitted he didn't read fully. Admitted that he shouldn't have said the stuff that he said. Then you turned on the U-turn by saying, oh no, the sentiment was correct, I shouldn't have just used those lines. Is this just Keir Starmer trying to make up for... I mean, the ratios on his X account is getting quite brutal when he puts out a tweet on immigration. I know as much as he wants to convince everyone he's on their side, the public are simply not buying it, right?
No, they're not, and I think he'd be well advised not to read the comments if indeed he posts at all, to be honest with you. Someone must post for him, but I wouldn't read the comments were I him. Yeah, I can understand why Angelina maybe might be a little bit miffed, because as I say, it was unusual for something quite as newsworthy to be briefed out from Number 10 from Cabinet. But I think Number 10 probably realised that she has more cut through. She seems more authentic when it comes to these types of issues than Keir Starmer. When she can talk about what working class communities think, people will listen to her and look at her and think, well, actually, that's where she's come from, so we will listen to her more than we'll listen to Keir Starmer.
And there's quite a lot of joking around, I see, in the political world. Len McCluskey, former head of Unite Union, have paid about 112, under his leadership, paid £112 million, it says here in the Times, for a hotel and conference complex in Birmingham, 74.5 million more than it is believed to have been worth, according to reports. It's also claimed that he took a private jet to watch the Champions League final as well. I mean, it's not a great look. He's a close ally of Jeremy Corbyn. Yeah. There was a lot of talk about Unite becoming the big funders of a new Zara Sultana Corbyn-led party. Yeah. Do you think this is a big story? Is Len McCluskey in big trouble?
I think it is a big story. I mean, you talk about the money that ended up being spent on this hotel, Unite Hotel and Conference Complex. This was Unite members' subs that paid for this, and over £100 million, far more than it was worth. Now, there's a police investigation going on into the way these contracts were handed out, so you have to be a little bit careful about what you say. But yeah, it's not a great look. And were Jeremy Corbyn thinking of having Len McCluskey as a prominent figure in this new party that he's setting up, he may well be thinking again, because obviously these types of headlines are not very good for Len McCluskey. And let's not forget, he's not just any old former General Secretary. I mean, he pretty much ran the Labour Party when Jeremy Corbyn was leader. He was certainly one of the key figures, so he was a very significant player in British politics for many years, and yeah, that's why this story is pretty significant, I think.
We know that the Times are saying that the case has been passed, as you say, to the Serious Fraud Office, and that the report that's been done has claimed that a Liverpool-based firm arranged for these football tickets and flights, including at least one private jet, and that the Flanagan Group, owned by men who McCluskey referred to as his, quote, good friends, overcharged Unite by at least £30 million to build the hotel complex. I will just say that Len McCluskey's lawyers, when contacted, have previously told the BBC that he paid for his own travel in full. But more to watch in story. Kevin Schofield, political editor of the Huffington Post, thank you so much for joining us today. Well, you listeners, you know what to do. Tell us what you think about what's going on in the world of politics today, as well as what's going on in your communities. How do we fix the broken social fabric of this great nation of ours? Call in with the 0344 499 1000. You can also WhatsApp us on that message too. You can message with the word talk to start at 87222, and you can follow us on X and message us as well at talkTV. We'll see you after the break.
Everything in that list that is being held up as the reason why our social fabric is fraying is the direct responsibility of the dreadful policies this government is making.
Well, those are their policies, the deindustrialisation. Those are their policies. So they're going, oh, look, here's a list of our policies that are causing societal decay.
Yes.
I mean, why don't you stop those policies? Why don't you do something that's good for this country? Honestly, Alex, you can't get your head around what's going on.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for the great Ian Collins, and I'm delighted to say that we're going to go to Theo Ashwood, Talk correspondent, and also someone I've always admired on the media. And this is my first chance to ever interview with him on air, so I'm super excited as a nerd on that. Sorry, Theo, for bigging you up there. But you've been at this afternoon's press conference with the Chief Constable of Essex Police. Just give us a quick summary, if you can, about what's been said so far. Where do we understand what was causing the violence? And more importantly, I think we heard a clip. He basically did admit the police were indeed bringing Antifa protesters into the Bell Hotel to come into essentially direct conflict with the anti-migrant protesters.
Yes, you heard from Ben Julian Harrington. He admitted that the Essex police had escorted protesters who were protesting against Antifa protesters who were protesting against those thousands or so local residents who had gathered outside the Bell Hotel in Epping to ensure that they could get to the site closer to where the protest was taking place to make their views known. He said they weren't driven in, but there were some protesters who were actually escorted away from the protest. But of course, it's worth remembering that Essex police initially denied, this was yesterday, that anybody had been escorted to the protests. It was only when they were shown video evidence that they admitted it. And now Ben Julian Harrington has said as much at this press conference. Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, called on him to resign within the last hour, saying that he had to go as a result of the decision taken by officers, which incidentally, Ben Julian Harrington said it was officers on the ground who made the decision to escort the counter-protesters, not senior management. And he said that he would not resign. He would not heed those calls from Mr. Farage to step down. He was going to remain in post, saying that everybody should have the right to make their views known. But in a sideswipe at the Reform UK leader, he said that it was incumbent on senior politicians and those with a significant voice to ensure that they realised that any comments or commentary they provide on social media has real world, as he put it, real world consequences. I did actually ask Ben Julian Harrington whether this was a direct riposte to what Mr. Farage had said, and he insisted that it wasn't, but certainly very thinly veiled from the Chief Constable.
I was about to say, I can't imagine, Theo, who else he was talking about when he made that comment in advance. And this is quite awkward, is it not? Because Ben Julian Harrington, obviously covering Essex, which is where Mr. Farage's constituency is based. So this will be the direct Chief Constable that Mr. Farage will deal with as a constituency MP. How do you think that leaves the relationship going forward? And are there other politicians coming out in support of Nigel Farage's call for Ben Julian Harrington to resign? This is also the same Chief Constable that I think was derided over the fact that a journalist had her house raided over some comments that she said online, and as obviously so therefore
Alison Pearson of the Daily Telegraph,
and as so obviously rightly rattled people before.
Yes, the Essex police force is not a police force that is unbeknownst to controversy. Alison Pearson, as you allude to there, the Telegraph journalist, was investigated after she allegedly posted a racist tweet online. And of course, the police were forced to drop their investigation. This, of course, is worth just reminding listeners, talk viewers as well, that, of course, these protests have taken place because the police now have a resident, an asylum seeker, who is a resident at the hotel. The hotel has been up and running since 2020 as an asylum hotel. But he's been charged and remanded into custody as a result of trying to kiss a schoolgirl on the local high street. That's what sparked the protests, which more than 1,000 people attended last Thursday. We're expecting further protests this week, notably on Thursday. I've heard that up in Walthamstow in northeast London, which is actually quite close to Epping, and is known to be quite a liberal part of London, there are posters up urging people to go and join the counter-protest when it takes place. So more trouble is expected at the Bell Hotel in the next few days. And the police, and Ben Julian Harrington, when I asked him about it, confirmed to me that his police force is going to have to rely on extra officers being drafted in from other parts of the country to support his officers on the ground and try and keep the peace. But of course, as Nigel Farage has pointed out and others have pointed out, that when you have a counter-protest being facilitated by the police force that is supposed to be keeping the peace, which is a recipe for trouble.
Theo, is there a sense that maybe protests are going to get banned in terms of outside of migrant hotels? Is the government, do you know, considering that as an option? There are some who would say it is provocative, it is emotive, it will bring out the worst of the far left and the far right in order to come into direct conflict. And some people would say that it's simply just not an appropriate place for those kind of protests to take place. Or there are obviously others, and I would certainly empathise with those people, who say they have a right to be able to express their feelings about these migrant hotels. And when we are seeing reports from Baroness Casey saying that more and more illegal migrants are part of these child rape gangs, and of course even this week reported in The Sun that a 27-year-old Eritrean man was only given a pathetic 14-month sentence after having sexually assaulted a 19-year-old woman with special needs last June. I mean, the public is in a very bad place anger-wise, and the government, I think, has just not really understood that after dismissing Southport last year rioters as just simply being far right.
Yes, you hit upon an important point there, Jonathan. Last year, of course, the government took the approach, a very combative approach, given the violence that we saw across the country, and they took, Lucy Connolly was given a 31-month jail sentence for posts that she put online and then deleted. This time around, and then there was also talk of even at the time of terrorism laws being used to enforce to bring about the toughest forms of justice against anybody caught rioting. This time around, the government's taking a very different approach, led by Angela Rayner, who is in the process of setting up the Office of Deputy Prime Minister. I mean, there was an extraordinary readout from Cabinet yesterday in which she acknowledged the tensions within society at the moment. Indeed, Keir Starmer and his team in Downing Street are keen to point out, and have been keen to point out over the last 48 hours or so, that they recognise that society is indeed fraying at the edges, but rather than trying to necessarily meet that head on, they're taking an approach which recognises the state of the unhappiness out there, even if they don't truly get the scale of the problem when it comes to these migrant hotels. Only on Monday, in front of the liaison committee, the Prime Minister said there was plenty of accommodation out there for asylum hotels, but then when asked to detail exactly where that was by Dame Meg Hillier, the chair of that committee was unable to do so, simply saying that he was going to write to the liaison committee with the exact details. So there is Ben Julian Harrington, who, by the way, it should be noted, isn't just the Chief Constable of Essex Police, he's also the lead for the National Police Chiefs Council when it comes to operational matters, namely handling disorder, rioting, protests. He made the point that he did not want to clamp down in any way, shape or form on people's right to protest, but simply that when the law was broken, his officers would not tolerate that. Arrests would be made and prosecutions would be brought. So there is a different tone at the moment from the likes of the police compared to last year when, as you say, the new government was only too keen to brand anybody who was caught up in these protests or had concerns about immigration as being far right.
Well, Theo Rushwood, talk correspondent there on the ground for us in Essex, having just been at the press conference held by Ben Julian Harrington, the Chief Constable of Essex Police, explaining and admitting the fact that people were being brought in and out of the protest by police who were there to counter-protest the anti-migrant and anti-hotel use protesters in Epping. I think there are more questions still to answer for Essex Police, and you can tell us what you think on 03444 499 1000, as well as WhatsApp us on that number too. You can message us on 87222 with the word talk at the start of your message, and follow and message us on X at talkTV. We'll see you shortly.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's me, Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for the great Ian Collins here on Talk, the home of common sense. And I've got a text that's come in to challenge me, and I love this when this happens. Jonathan, why do you refer to far-right thugs and follow with far-left protesters? Almost as if you're on the left of politics, you're a peaceful protester, but if you're on the right, then you must be a thug. It is my opinion that you are still hanging on to your blinkers. I don't want to see the vast majority of the population can see clearly. I'll tell you what, I haven't got a name for that, but let me be very clear with you, okay? There is no doubt that a tiny minority of the anti-migrant protesters will have had far-right thugs. There are some photos, unverified, of literature being dispersed from banned political parties or parties known to push extremist far-right material. But that is, again, a quote, a tiny minority of the protesters. My anger is those thugs that turn up looking for violence, and they exist, undermine the very majority, the overwhelming majority of legitimate protesters who have every right to be there. And I stand in solidarity with those peaceful protesters being angry and upset over migrant hotels. I remember when I stood outside a migrant hotel in Stoke-on-Trent after it was set up and put a video on my social media when I was the Member of Parliament for Stoke-on-Trent North. I remember when I even named the hotel in the Chamber, and there were articles the day after condemning me for naming hotels for putting those illegal migrants at risk and saying that I was in the wrong. I absolutely accept that the far-left protesters, the Antifa, the Stand Up to Racism, are full of masked-up thugs who are simply looking for violence in order to create the narrative that they wishes to say that anyone who protests against migrants are somehow far-right, racist, fascist. And I hate those people with all my heart because they undermine again and do dismiss the legitimate concerns of people. So I hope I've been able to clarify very clearly that the overwhelming majority of people protesting against migrant hotels are peaceful, are patriots and have every right to do so. But it is undoubted that a tiny minority of those people who will be mingling in that crowd are there looking to push far-right narratives and to take part in violence, just like the far-left lunatics who rock up being escorted, I can't believe I've even said that, escorted by the police in to have that confrontation outside the Bell Hotel in Epping, which undermines the very serious concerns that those local residents have raised about the safety of their women and their children on the streets of Epping. So there you go, there you have it. Right, let's get to an exclusive here on Talk, which is we are now joined by Councillor George Madrick, who is now just defected from the Portsmouth Independent Party to become the Reform UK leader on Portsmouth City Council. Hello, Councillor George, how are you?
Good afternoon, I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good, and thank you so much for joining us here on Talk and for sharing your story. So a big story in Portsmouth that you are the long-standing councillor for Paulsgrove, and you today have announced your departure from the Portsmouth Independence Group to join Reform UK as their new local group leader. May I ask, first of all, what led you to joining Reform UK? Why now?
I think, look, at the end of the day, I got into politics in 2021 when there was a massive vacuum. For me personally, back then, I felt that none of the major three parties represented my interests at the time, and independent was the only way I could possibly go. So that's what I did. That's what I got elected on. But over the years, it's been incredible to see how Reform have developed and how their growth has just rapidly increased. I really like the way that they have improved their constitution, how they've sorted out their structure, and they're really just becoming the only option and the only sensible option for this country has to get rid of this crazy Labour government. And I think that I'd be hypocritical if I believed in something so strongly and didn't put my name behind it. And I encourage others to do the same if they feel the same way as me as well.
Well, it's a very brave thing indeed to do. And out of interest, obviously, being an independent means that it will be harder for people to pin down your political sort of ideology. Of course, there will be plenty of people like Reform that say, we don't need to get bogged down in ideology. We need to get het up by common sense. Out of interest, are, for example, you comfortable with Reform's position on lifting the two-child benefit cap, many of whom will attack as a Corbyn policy, whilst also this week having Nigel Farage saying that he'd be willing to set up Nightingale prisons to lock up an extra 12,000 prisoners and in potentially deport people to serve sentences in places like El Salvador, who have done, I think, a fantastic job on cracking down on law and order.
Listen, I mean, law and order, I think, is one of the main priorities that this country has at the moment. In Portsmouth alone, knife crime is going through the roof. In Paulsgrove, in my ward, we took a proactive approach about 3-4 years ago, and our ward has gone from the most dangerous wards in the city down to the least dangerous ward in the city due to the things that we've done on a local level. But look, the policies that Reform have announced recently in their crime announcement is incredible. The fact that, I mean, you've got to remember, in 1970, there was only 1.6 million crimes. And just last year, there's over 6.5 million now. Something has got to be done. The Labour government are releasing prisoners early, which is causing more havoc on the streets. There's shoplifting is rife. The police aren't investigating appropriate crimes. Something has to be done. You know, and I think that their announcement in relation to, they've committed, obviously, as you'll know, to getting 30,000 additional police officers over their term. They're going to open up tens of thousands of new prison places over the first 18 months. And as you rightly said, that they will use ex-MOD sites. They're going to get rid of 10,000 plus prisoners that are foreign, that have committed crimes on our soil, that will then be deported. I mean, these are all common sense policies. These are sensible policies. And I really, truly believe that Reform will be the toughest party that this country has ever seen on crime.
And what do you say to the criticism that people will say about these policies, that they are, they quote what people say, they're populist, that they are have your cake and eat it, that suddenly we're going to be able to deport 10,000 people when we know the courts will interfere through judicial litigation, as well as some countries saying they simply wouldn't accept those foreign criminals back without taking in return some of our criminals from their country back, or indeed that the cost it doesn't seem to add up when a lot of people are trying to say that you can't keep spending the same net zero money over and over again? Or is it just a case that you think that people bizarrely are asking for Reform UK to give all the detail, all the spending costs, when all the other parties seem to be able to not have to do that 4 years out from a general election?
Listen, I mean, with all due respect, I mean, as I say, I'm not a Labour or Conservative in any regards. You know, I was an independent before making this decision today. But the one thing I have learned over the last 15 years of politics is you can't trust a single word that Labour or Conservatives put down on a piece of paper. It may as well effectively be torn up and thrown in a bin. You know, unfortunately, what they've always said and what they've pledged has never come true. And Reform are offering a real viable alternative to this. Now, every idea is going to be criticised. You know this too well, doing the job that you did. Every idea is criticised, and every idea has holes and flaws, which you then need to look at and analyse and revalue and everything else like that. That's a normal process in our democracy. However, the fact that Reform are being so strong on this policy and coming up with these new ideas and these new methods that they're going to take an approach of course there's going to be criticism. We completely expect that. However, can you see anybody else offering a viable alternative? I can't. So I think we need to give the policy a chance and see how it develops and works. As I say, and you'll know, being an MP like you were, you have lots of ideas and you go through the process of those ideas. But as you know, you're always criticised for anything you say. So criticism is something that comes with the job.
No, absolutely. And I think actually it's kind of bizarre how Conservative Party, Liberal Democrats, Greens, and indeed Labour themselves somehow are not held to account. I would remind people that this Labour government said they had a fully costed manifesto, and I think we're only going to borrow 10 to 15 billion pounds. Now borrowing, I think, 55 billion pounds above what they said it would be. Obviously, we've seen the economy go completely the other way. And as for the Conservatives, promising tens of thousands when it came to net migration year in, year out, and actually getting near to 1 million per year. The idea that other parties somehow have made promises that are all perfect, all costed, and all sensible and grown up, and the Reform are somehow just throwing out populist narratives is for the birds. I think what Reform offers is actually a party at the moment that the public are tuning into and going, you know what, we've tried everyone else and they've been a complete and utter disaster, waste of time, and we're willing to roll the dice, and we are expecting, we may be disappointed, but you know what, we've got nowhere else to go. And I suppose, is that what led you? I mean, as you say, you've not been Labour or Conservative. You've obviously now got 2 Labour members of Parliament in Portsmouth. You did have a very prominent Conservative member of Parliament in Penny Mordaunt before the 2024 general election. Was there no way you could consider the Conservatives as a viable option to go to instead of Reform UK?
No, look, and I'm always an honest person. You know, for me, I always, say what I exactly think, which sometimes gets me in trouble. But, I'm not going to sit here and say all Conservatives are bad. You know, there is certain Conservatives that are good people, and I think, would be a welcome addition. But, at the end of the day, we've got to look at the history of the Conservatives and Labour and the history of their performance. And that performance has been abysmal, absolutely abysmal on crime. At the moment, Reform is really easy to criticise, right? Because they're winning in the polls, they're storming the local election by-elections, they're doing incredibly well. And make no mistake, the biggest threat to Labour is Reform. The biggest threat to Conservatives is Reform. So they're going to get loads of mud thrown at them, but who cares? At the end of the day, the people that matter, the people that are at home, that are watching this go on and will put an X in the box. And I truly believe that Reform is the only major alternative to this rubbish system that we've been living with for decades. And I think that the people are sick and tired of this. And as you say, we're offering something in front of you to give us a shot and a chance. And at the end of the day, the other 2 have proved that they're not capable of running it. And I think Reform, at this moment in time, are doing everything they can to prove that they are the most viable option. And I think people should put their faith in that and give Reform a shot.
Well, thank you so much. That's Councillor George Madgwick, recent Reform defector from the Portsmouth Independent Party to Reform UK, where he now sits as the Reform UK group leader on Portsmouth City Council. What a week it's been, with yesterday Nigel Farage being able to also capture his first member of the Welsh Senedd, Welsh Parliament, for those who don't know, with a Conservative defector there. And obviously recently Sir Jake Berry, former Conservative Party chairman too, having recently joined Reform UK. I think Nigel Farage will be having a big smile on his face with the last couple of weeks he's been having. Well, guess what, listeners? We want to hear from you. As you know, we've been reading out your texts, taking your calls, and you can call in 0344 499 1000. You text in to 87222, but start your message with the word talk, or you can follow and message us on X at talkTV. We'll see you after this break.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, Britain. This is Talk. This is the home of Common Sense, and I'm Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for the great Ian Collins this afternoon. And what a show we have had so far with you today. Well, we have had, obviously, that big press conference today from the Chief Constable of Essex Police, which Theo Usherwood, Talk correspondent, was at and we spoke to earlier. Ben Julian Harrington, the Chief Constable of Essex Police, spoke to the media this afternoon about protests outside the Bell Hotel in Epping and has so far confirmed that 10 people have been arrested. He also addressed claims that officers escorted pro-migrant protesters from Stand Up to Racism to the hotel. We can hear that in his clip now.
I mean, there's been some accusation in the media that we drove people to the protest. That is not true. We have not driven anybody to that protest. People made their own way there. And of course, one of the accusations and one of the things circulated is we did take people away for their safety, for the safety of everyone there, because it was the best operational thing to do to prevent violence, to diffuse the situation. We drove them away from a violent confrontation.
Chief Constable Harrington also responded to calls for his resignation, including from Reform UK leader and Essex MP Nigel Farage.
If you're not apologising, are you going to follow the demands of some politicians in this country who have called you to resign over this?
No, I'm not. I'm not going to do that. And this is not about me. This is about the communities of Essex, is what I spoke about earlier. You know, the communities that are disrupted, the legitimate people who want to go and protest outside that hotel, and I make no observation of that view of that. If they're peaceful and lawful, they want to express their views. That is their right, and this is important that within the laws of this country, that Essex Police allow that to take place. I come back to the point where people break the law, where they smash up police vans, where they assault workers from the hotel, where they are chasing people away. Those are the people that we will not tolerate.
Well, you've been having your say, listeners. We had Francis from Lelanley who's messaged in regarding the police statement. If the Chief Constable is so clear on his responsibilities regarding supporting the right to protest, why did they initially deny giving Stand Up to Racism a lift or escort into the protest? And we're now delighted to be joined by Steve, a caller who is in Redditch, who is also an ex-police officer. Hello, Steve.
Hi, Jonathan. How are you?
I'm great, thank you very much, and thank you for calling in. As an ex-copper, I'm interested to get your view on what we've seen from Nigel Farage posting on his X account today, as well as the Chief Constable himself admitting that there were people escorted, if be it on foot, to demonstrate against the anti-migrant protesters.
Yeah, well, if I can firstly say that as an ex-police officer, the boys and girls that do the job at the bottom, or the officers on the ground, they do a good job and they do what they can. This is a problem with senior management, and in this case, the Chief Constable of Essex Police. Just going from what I've seen, now obviously we can only comment about what we've seen on these recordings, on the radio, etc., and comments online, but it would appear to me during these peaceful protests, the local community have turned up to peacefully protest, and then the police have escorted a hostile group to this peaceful protest, to which then there has a disorder has broken out. Now, I heard I've been working today, so I've only heard some of the comments from the Chief Constable of Essex Police. He said about obviously protecting the rights of people who want to protest under the Human Rights Act, which is right. However, escorting an opposition hostile group isn't actually a human right. Yes, they got a right to protest. However, the police knew that the initial protest was peaceful. Your right to assembly is a qualified right and not an absolute right. Your absolute rights are your right to life, life free of torture. Qualified rights can be suspended if there is a likelihood of people getting harmed or violence, as we saw in these protests. The police should have, in that situation, prevented this hostile group, the anti-fascists, whatever they like to call themselves. Yeah. They should have stopped this group. I think this is on Essex Police escorting this. Any injuries, any arrests to to the local community, and any injuries suffered to their officers or the public, they are to blame for this.
Well, that is a fascinating thing that you've just said there, Steve, and I'm keen to get your view as well, because you did rightly point out that the police officers on the ground are just following the instructions of their bosses, and they are brave boys and girls who are putting themselves in harm's way to keep us safe. Theo Usherwood, our talk correspondent, said that when it was put to him about the escorting to the ground, that he was very quick, the Chief Constable of Essex Police, to say that was the decision made by officers on the ground and not senior management. It's quite disgraceful, isn't it, to throw his juniors under the bus?
I'd say it is, and yeah, definitely. And we all know that if you're the chief or the CEO of a company, however your staff act is a direct reflection of you. Yeah. So he does need to be held to account for it. He's made a point of saying this, the human rights, are free to assemble. He should know he's a chief constable of a national police force in England. He should know the difference between absolute and qualified human rights. And his officers, but it's the way they are instructed to deal with things. They should know that, this is going to go off. We've got a peaceful protest at the moment. Why would you want to put people at risk and your own officers at risk by allowing this to happen when you can prevent it legally? Just keep them down the road and don't bring them any closer. They incited this, I'm afraid. And I think anyone who's been arrested on from the local people, I think they should have no further action taken against them as they were provoked. And that's my belief.
That's Steve from Redditch there. Thank you so much, Steve, for calling into the show today. And what a powerful call that was. An ex-police officer saying that the Chief Constable of Essex Police did not have to allow the counter-demonstration, which is an agitated group looking to seek violence. That is the Antifa and Stand Up to Racism crowd that I'm referring to, that it was a qualified human right, that right to assembly. The Chief Constable could have suspended it on public safety grounds, allowed the peaceful protest against the hotel use for illegal migrants to carry on peacefully and undisturbed, and therefore not allow those ugly scenes to unfold as we saw on our screens and on our social media platforms over the weekend and into early this week. A very powerful call indeed, and thank you to Steve for making that. Another call here saying, afternoon Jonathan, afternoon Jonathan, so the policeman seeks to assure everyone they have sufficient resources to deal with every eventuality. Try saying that to the retailer who routinely has their stock pilfered, or the person who has had their car stolen with absolutely no follow-up. I could go on, but you get my point. Law and order has broken down, as most of us predicted. Regards from Tad in Cambridge. We've also had another one here from Kevin. We can't repair anything at the moment because firstly Labour are in for another 4 years and will move heaven and earth to stay in power by manipulating the voting system. The country's at breaking point, and like what I'm seeing down the road, where MPs like you, John, who's one of the few Tories who came out with any credit, so please consider reform and leave the rest to us. Kevin in Southampton. Thank you, Kevin, for your text. I thought that was Kevin O'Sullivan initially, maybe texting in there, but it's not. It's Kevin from Southampton. Paul Green, I can't stop thinking that someone at the very top of this country is insisting that the police keep making these mad decisions, then ordering a cover-up and keep their name out of it. Why would the police want to deliver activists to a peaceful demonstration? These are the left-wing scumbags that Starmer never mentions. The police must be being ordered without a choice of what to do. Another one here again that says, regarding an earlier story when we talked about the Conservative Party reshuffle, the Tories and James, cleverly that is, are showing us that they are not clever nor trustworthy. Well, listeners, you've been having your say, and make sure that you continue to do so with our question of the day. How do we repair the broken social fabric of Great Britain? Call in 0344 499 1000. You can also WhatsApp us on that message too. You can also text with the word talk at the start of your message to 87222 and follow us and message us on @talkTV. We have got some more great stories coming down the track. We want you to make sure you're staying up to date with us, looking soon at the next story, which is about the Sun having exposed migrant hotels being used to have illegal migrants work as illegal delivery drivers for Deliveroo, Just Eat and others as well. The government has finally decided it's going to share its data with those companies in order to make sure that we can clamp down on this illegal working. Do you have confidence this government will deliver? Make sure you carry on tuning in. Make sure you keep sending us your views. This is the home of common sense. That is Talk with me, Jonathan Gullis.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is me, Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for the great Ian Collins in the final hour of today's Afternoon Empire. I'm on the home of common sense. That is Talk. Coming up, Essex police have denied busing counter-protesters to demonstrations outside an Epping asylum hotel where 10 people have been arrested following violent clashes over the past week. Meanwhile, it comes as Downing Street is warning Britain must repair its fraying social fabric to avoid another summer of discontent amid fears of renewed unrest over immigration. And Prince Harry and Meghan's £100 million 5-year deal with Netflix has been scrapped after their two most recent shows flopped. You know what to do to tell us, to let us know what you think. You call in 0344 499 1000. You can text in the word TALK at the start of your message to 87222, and you can message and follow us on X at talkTV. Well, let's get to our next guest, a good friend of us here on Talk and the new political editor of The Sun. Here's Mr. Jack Elsom. Hello, Jack. How are you?
Good afternoon, Jonathan. Nice to see you.
Lovely to see you too, Jack. Well, The Sun's having a great week. In fact, Sir Keir Starmer has even said in The Sun today that The Sun has rightly put a spotlight on migrants working illegally as food delivery riders, and we're tackling the problem. If a rider is staying at this accommodation, the companies will know and can close down the rider's account, and we will do what it takes to uphold the law and ensure fairness for the British people. This is after The Sun exposed that some illegal migrants were raking up to £1,000 a week in illegal working for firms such as Deliveroo, Just Eat and Uber Eats. Well, first of all, Jack, it's a bit of a weird one, isn't it? It takes The Sun to actually have to get the government to do something and take action on it.
Yes, totally. And it is a nationwide scandal. And for the past few weeks, The Sun has really been leading the way on exposing this racket. I think that something which sticks in the craw of most of the public, one, because it is clearly very unfair that these illegal migrants are essentially double dipping. Not only are they taking free bed and board, sustenance, food, whatever, from the taxpayer when they stay at their migrant hotels, they are also then working in the underground economy by, essentially working illegally for these delivery companies. But also, this is a massive pull factor when it comes to small boat crossings. One of the reasons why we have thousands of people crossing every month the channel is because they know that it's very easy to get an illegal job here as well. And so The Sun has been shining a light on this. It seems to have sent a rocket on the backside of government, who are finally acting on this scandal. Not only are they now increasing their raids around the migrant hotels where these Deliveroo or Just Eat or whatever brand drivers are working, but now also the government have signed a data sharing deal with these delivery companies, which means that they will be turning over the location of the migrant hotels. So essentially these companies, if they see much activity in the area, can get these riders off the apps because it will be clear they're working illegally. Hopefully it works, but the proof will be in the pudding. The talk is cheap, and action will mean everything with this one. And Keir Starmer is writing in The Sun today saying that this is going to be part of his blueprint to try and stop illegal migration, and I hope it works.
Well, Jack, I mean, Sun readers are unforgiving folk, and rightly so, because they feel like they've been marched up many hills, both by Labour and Conservative, and then marched back down them in terms of expectations. What's the feedback from Sun readers? Are they hopeful? Are they believing in Sir Keir Starmer? He's got his deal with France, where he'll be allowed to send, we think, up to 50 a week. So you've still got a 94% chance if you come by a small boat staying in the UK. Sorry, that's me digging that one out, Prime Minister, not The Sun. Then you've obviously got his deal now with Germany, which is meant to stop, obviously, small boats being taken to the shores of northern France. David Lammy announcing sanctions against individuals in terms of freezing their assets, access to bank accounts and denying them entry to the UK. And obviously Sir Keir Starmer busy tweeting on X almost on an hourly basis, it feels like, about how he's going to stop the boat, smash the gangs, whatever phrase he's trying to use nowadays. But the ratios on those Twitter comments have not been in his favour, I'd say. It's been quite a brutal time for him. Do you think this is the turning point for this Labour government when it comes to this issue? Are they going to start, do you think, taking the issue seriously and winning over public trust?
Well, I really don't doubt Keir Starmer's sincerity when he says that he wants to get to grips with this problem, not only because he probably believes it is the right thing to do, but also it is incredibly politically important for him. If he wants any hope of winning the next election, he is going to have to get a grip on illegal migration. I think smashing the gangs is going to be part of that. I think the problem, though, is that smashing the gangs in isolation is just doomed to fail, because we have poured tens of billions of pounds across the decades into trying to smash the drug gangs. And it has not worked. And it is as easy as it ever has been to get drugs in this country, because these gangs will always thrive if there's a market. They are ruthless. They are ingenious. They will find a way to get around it. And I think that while it is a noble aim to want to flush out people smuggling gangs, it has to be coupled with a viable deterrent. And at the moment, I think that is what we are seriously lacking. So it is getting rid of the pull factors, which make people cross from France, not a war zone, across that channel, making that dangerous journey to get into Britain. And it is also getting some viable deportations off the ground. Now, the government are saying they have increased deportations since they got into office. However, we know that many of them are voluntary, many of them are foreign national offenders. And since 2018, only 4% of small boat arrivals have actually been deported. That is because a lot of the time it is incredibly difficult to deport small boat arrivals, because sometimes you don't even know their nationality. They check their passports away. You can't do fingerprint tests on them. And that is why the Tories came up with Rwanda. And whatever the merits or demerits of Rwanda, at least it was an idea that you would have a third country to be able to deport people to, those people that couldn't be deported back to their home country. It was a deterrent, I think, in some regards. You know, there's obviously questions about scale or whatever. But I think unless Keir Starmer really grasp the nettle with this and comes up with some radical solutions. He seems to be having incremental deals, a deal with Germany, a deal with France that might or might not work. But I think unless you really get radical with this problem, then you're not going to solve it. And I think that's what readers really want to see at the moment.
And do you think he undermines himself? For example, we know he made that Island of Strangers speech. We then read from Tom Baldwin in The Observer that he admits to not actually having properly read that speech before giving it, that he regrets using those words. Then U-turns and that and says, no, the sentiment was correct. I just regret using those very small portion of words, Island of Strangers. Then, of course, this week at the liaison committee, Meg Hillier almost looks like she's flabbergasted when she's looking at him as he's saying, oh no, I think there's lots of local authorities that have plenty of housing to accommodate illegal migrants rather than having them housed in hotels, which seems to be very out of tune with public sentiment. Are these the things that undermine him when he then tries to make a step forward, as you say, with these incremental steps in trying to remove pull factors?
I do think so, yeah. I think there is a bit of an authenticity gap when it comes to what Keir Starmer says and what Keir Starmer does. Like I said before, I think that he generally wants to get a grip on this problem. However, I think that people don't want to see these sort of small deals. And yes, he sort of talks up France as a landmark deal, but at the moment it does look a bit small fry compared to the actual scale of the challenge which is presented to us. And that's why Nigel Farage has currently got the momentum, because he is saying something like, why don't we just tow the boats back? It is ridiculous why we can't just tow them back. People are coming across this country. They're breaking in illegally. They don't deserve to be able to come in. Now, there are going to be all sorts of problems with doing something like that if you get into government. But at the moment, people don't want to hear talk about details and talk about whether it's even viable or not. People just want to hear someone that gets their concerns, that is coming up with a radical plan of trying to solve this issue. Because at the moment, I think that the public are getting more and more fed up. You know, the first boat crossings in recent times came in 2018. What's that, 7 years on? And we're still dealing, 8 years on, we're still dealing with this problem. It's swallowing up ever more billions, ever more hotels, and ever more public bandwidth is going on it, and the public are just getting absolutely sick to the back teeth of it.
Do you know what I think, Jack? I think a lot of it is that the public are sick to death of excuses, both under Conservatives and Labour. They keep hearing about, oh, you can't do this because of X, or you can't do this because of Y. And Nigel Farage is saying, yeah, there might be problems, and I'm not denying that, but you know what? We're going to give it a damn good try. And I think people just want to hear a bit of hope, a bit of optimism, a bit of boosterism, which, let's be honest, Boris Johnson used to be very famously good at, questions, which is why Boris Johnson probably was such a good communicator with the public. We know Nigel Farage has been having his big lawless Britain launch, his 6-week campaign, he's saying, over the summer, where he's going to be setting out Reform UK stall on law and order. And we know today he's had a big swipe at his own chief constable for the area that he represents by saying that the chief constable of Essex Police should resign with immediate effect over what appears to be on video footage of police officers escorting people in. I mean, what was your takeaway from the press conference that we had from the chief constable of Essex Police today regarding what's been going on in Epping outside the migrant hotel?
Yeah, it's turned into a bit of a he said, she said, hasn't it? Or rather, he said, the chief constable against Nigel Farage. I don't know whether people have been bussed in or not, and I've seen the footage, and whether or not the police have facilitated counter protests, as they often do. That is probably, I think, where we're at. I think that the police have a very difficult job in these scenarios because clearly there is a totally legitimate right to protest. And from the footage that I've seen and from the evidence even of the police, it does seem that the overwhelming majority of the protests outside the Bell Hotel in Epping have been totally peaceful. Many of them women who I think are now really feeling scared for themselves, scared for their children, scared for their communities, turning out outside, and rightly so. Always with these things, you're going to get bad actors who come along to try and hijack it. And I don't think that the behavior of mindless thugs helps anyone, especially when they're trying to make a point themselves about law and order. It totally undermines their case if they're starting to, hurl bottles and rocks at the police. But that is, I think, only the actions of a small minority. And you would hope that, the ugly scenes die down, because there is a serious issue here. And that is that the public are totally fed up with undocumented males coming into this country. No one had any idea who they are. Security vetting is minimal. Sometimes you don't even know their nationality, who they are, any criminal records whatsoever. And, to top it all off, they're given free bed and board in a perfectly nice hotel, front of the queue, and a lot of Brits these days feel they're at the back of the queue. And I thought it was very telling yesterday that Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner addressed Cabinet saying that, this could really, really stoke public unrest, and the government needs to be alive to that. And it's not just migration, I think, which is driving this. I think that levels of deprivation, people feeling they've been left behind, people feeling they're getting poorer over the past few decades. Angela Rayner herself said that the epicenter of the Southport riots were areas where, it had some of the biggest poverty levels in the country. And I think that's probably right. And it all feeds into each other. And so I think that these protests are totally legitimate, and people should feel the right to go out there and be aggrieved. Hopefully it doesn't get hijacked anymore by some bad actors, because I don't think anyone wants to see that.
And last one from me, Jack, quickly, is were Sun readers tuning in eagerly to hear about Kemi Badenoch's Conservative Party reshuffle? Are you excited by James Cleverly's return? Kevin Hollinrake as the face of a renewed Conservative Party, as nice a guy as he is. From members I've spoken to in many WhatsApp groups, 2/3 of them say it's a return of the Wets. Kevin Schofield, we had on earlier, who's obviously the political editor of the Huffington Post, saying he was hearing the One Nation caucus of the Conservative Party were cheering with joy. The right of the Conservative Party were somewhat grumbly. What's the takeaway that you've had from any interaction with MPs you've spoken to about the latest reshuffle?
Yeah, listen, I think bringing James Cleverly back was probably a smart move. There's a lot of people in the grassroots of the party who are, sort of Cameronite centrists, so I think were pretty disaffected over the past 8 months or so. I think Kemi Badenoch was damned if she did and damned if she didn't, really, because clearly 8 months in doing a reshuffle is clearly a panicked response, and is a recognition that things have not been going swimmingly. They're consistently third in the polls behind Reform and Labour. But if you didn't do it, then you'd be carrying on the same trajectory with, let's be honest, a lot of the shadow cabinet who have not been pulling their weight and have been failing to land blows on the government, a lot of the time not even at the races when there are open goals. But we didn't really get a wholesale change, which I think a lot of people might have been expecting. If you were simply replacing Ed Arger and you did a few tweaks here and there to try and, rejig the decks, fine. but it was more than that. But it wasn't so big that you had a total overhaul of the top team. And so I found it a bit weird, frankly. I don't think many people, though, will even be paying attention at the moment. It's a bubble story.
That's the problem for the Conservative Party, Jack, right there. They're not paying attention.
That is true. There was a poll yesterday which was showing the recognisability of shadow cabinet ministers, and the most name recognition was Robert Jenrick in the country, and he had 18%, 1-8. So I think the Tory party have a lot to do in terms of getting cut through in the public again.
Well, Jack Elson, political editor of The Sun, thank you so much for joining us today. And we quickly now go to our next guest, Henry Bolton, international border control expert and friend of us here on Talk. Hello, Henry, how are you?
Hi, good afternoon.
Thank you so much for joining us, Henry. Now, look, obviously, we've heard that Sir Keir Starmer is now going to share the details about these migrant hotels with the companies like Deliveroo, Just Eat and Uber Eats in order for them to be able to close any accounts that are set up from there to stop illegal migrants earning an illegal wage on the black market, essentially, as well as ensuring that they can then clamp down on any of the takeaway chains that may be using these workers. Is this a positive step in the right direction? Does the Prime Minister deserve a slap on the back?
Anything that reduces the opportunity for these asylum seekers to work illegally has got to be a good thing. I heard your conversation with Jack just now. It really all depends on how determined the government is and the Home Office and the immigration enforcement people in enforcing this. But what we've got to recognise, I mean, I'll be entirely honest, it was a little frustrating listening to that conversation just now with Jack, because you both rightly pointed out that everybody wants something done, and actually you were both doing very much, and this isn't a criticism, it's just an observation of the world that we're in. You were pointing out what is going wrong, why what's happening is wrong and is not being dealt with. There was a raft of things there that the public is not happy with, but we're not talking about solutions.
Yeah.
And when we talk about reform, and you rightly said, reform is saying that they will do something about it, but their plan, frankly, and I've worked on borders for many, many years at governmental level, helping countries to address strategic threats such as the small boats coming across. When everybody's talking about reform and their determination, well, I just wish that everybody would actually hold reform to account and say, look, your plan, your 4-point plan, will not survive contact with political, economic, legal, diplomatic, or operational reality. It simply won't. And in that noise of that reform is, I want reform to whoever is in government to succeed with this. And that's why I'm saying it, because I'm trying to shake the tree to improve the quality of the policies, whoever comes up with them.
I think, Henry, you make a fair point. The problem, as you say, is that do we end up, if reform were to take government, another party marching the public up the hill in terms of expectations, only for that to then be marched back down, right, and even more despondent, even more despairing, and let's be honest, well then, as Nigel Farage himself admitted, if he fails, gives credence to the very extremes and worst of our society who will be looking to capitalise on a Reform UK failure.
Precisely, and the threat and the risk to the British public that is associated with this. I mean, I know from my direct experience in these operations, in trying to prevent people smuggling to the United Kingdom, that terrorist organisations do infiltrate the economic migrants, people smuggling routes. So there is all of that. But ultimately, these people will not come to the United Kingdom if there is no benefit in doing so. Who on earth travels to a place if there is no attractiveness about doing so? They come to the United Kingdom, and they don't stay in France, and they don't stay anywhere else, because the United Kingdom, for a whole variety of reasons, is an attractive place to go. So if we want these boats to stop, then we've got to address that. We have to address that. Part of that is preventing them being able to exploit the United Kingdom economically, send money back home. And the whole organised crime element that actually encourages, promotes, solicits this movement is predicated on it being economically useful for people to come from Somalia or Sudan or wherever it may be. So they encourage that, they move through. So we've got to address that, and the way to address that is frankly that every single one of these people needs to be detained securely, ideally not on the UK where they are, we're subject to protests and activists and all sorts of legal issues. They need to go somewhere like Ascension, which is the SDP policy, like Ascension, securely detained there. And if there is no exception to that, these boats will stop. And that's the key piece. Now, the problem with this government is that Keir Starmer, he's son of a toolmaker and his mother was in the NHS, but he himself is defined by the fact that he was Director of Public Prosecutions. He is a lawyer. He feels aggrieved, insulted by the idea of criminality. And, well, we all do. So that's what he goes after. What he's trying to do is smash the gangs. Fine, I'm a former copper. I'm all for smashing gangs and all the rest. But you've also got the motivation here that we've got to deal with is the migrants. And he doesn't seem to be offended by illegal immigration at all. What he's offended by is the criminality associated with it. And yet the criminality will always meet the demand, as Jack was saying, if the migrants wish to come here illegally. There will always be somebody trying to meet that demand and make money out of it. So we have to address the attractiveness of the United Kingdom. If we don't, this problem will continue. And whether Angela Rayner and others are right, that it'll just feed more and more into public unrest, I don't know whether it'll be unrest, but dissatisfaction is rising incredibly rapidly. And I don't think the Prime Minister has even grasps that fact at the moment.
Well, Henry Bolton, International Border Control expert, thank you so much for joining us here on Talk. And we will go straight to the break before I get in trouble with the people behind the glass trying to keep me in line.
Across the UK, on on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. This is the home of common sense, and I'm Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for the great Ian Collins today. We have Ben Julian Harrington, Chief Constable of Essex Police, spoke to the media this afternoon about protests outside the Bell Hotel in Epping and confirmed that 10 arrests have taken place. He also addressed the claims that police officers escorted pro-migrant protesters from Stand Up to Racism to the hotel.
I mean, there's been some accusation in the media that we drove people to the protest. That is not true. We have not driven anybody to that protest. People made their own way there. And of course, one of the accusations and one of the things circulated is we did take people away for their safety, for the safety of everyone there, because it was the best operational thing to do to prevent violence, to diffuse the situation. We drove them away.
But earlier on today, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage and Essex Member of Parliament called for Chief Constable Harrington's resignation.
Have a look at this video.
If these are locals, why are they getting a police car? Where time's the next bus? You wait 15 minutes for a bus and then 3 come all along at once. Look, they're all cramming in.
This shows Stand Up to Racism, as they're called, with Antifa, a violent, thuggish group, arriving at the train station and literally, by Essex Police, being bussed to the Bell Hotel. These were the people that caused the disturbances. These were the people that caused the riots. Essex Police caused the disturbances. What on earth were Essex Police thinking? Is it that they just hate so much ordinary residents determined to stand up for their own rights? I don't know the answer to that question. What I do know is what Essex Police have done here is absolutely disgraceful.
And here's Chief Constable Harrington's response.
If you're not apologising, are you going to follow the demands of some politicians in this country who have called you to resign over this?
No, I'm not. I'm not going to do that. And this is not about me. This is about the communities of Essex, is what I spoke about earlier. You know, the communities that are disrupted, the legitimate people who want to go and protest outside that hotel, and I make no observation of that view of that. If they're peaceful and lawful, they want to express their views. That is their right, and this is important that within the laws of this country, that Essex Police allow that to take place. I come back to the point where people break the law, where they smash up police vans, where they assault workers from the hotel, where they are chasing people away. Those are the people that we will not tolerate.
Well, you've been texting, calling in, and we go to our next caller, which is Herbie in Harrow. Hello, Herbie, how are you?
Yes, good afternoon, Jonathan. Well, a bit annoyed and upset with the way the country's going. I mean, say, the government's gone on holiday for 6 weeks, the country's in dire straits, it's in the gutter and it's about to disappear down a giant sinkhole. Simple as that.
Are you quite shocked that we're seeing Parliament go on to recess for so long? I mean, look, when I was in Parliament, I was always told the holiday dates, as it were, the recess dates, are based on school holidays. And I used to go, OK, I understand that, you know, MPs, like anyone else, should have a bit of time with their family, etc. But we are also elected to a very privileged position to run and manage the country. And I don't really understand why MPs need 6 weeks before they'll only be back for about 2 weeks maximum before they go on the conference recess, which goes all the way through to mid-October.
Exactly. The trouble is, Jonathan, we're in a crisis now. I wish people to unite with me today, and I want to declare UDI in Great Britain so that we can get something done. We need that. We need an independence. We need this government out because it's going to destroy the country quicker than anything else I've ever seen in my lifetime.
What's the thing that most worries you about the government?
They're not doing anything. They do not know what to do. They've got no idea of how to control anything, how to bring anything under control. They haven't got a clue what to do. All they keep doing is spending money, which we don't have, which you and I are going to have to pay for. And I don't think they've really got any reason as to know how to put the country right. They haven't got a damn clue about it.
And who would you look to solve the problems? Is there anyone else that you think can solve it?
Well, I'm with Reform anyway, and I've known Nigel for a very long time. The man speaks the truth always. He's very popular as a person, and if he doesn't do it right, he'll be out on his ear as well. We've got to have somebody that's going to at least give something a try. We must try something to sort these problems out. It's only getting worse. I've said for many weeks now, we're heading for disaster. We're heading for a crisis. We are heading for civil unrest. I'm sorry, Jonathan, but it's facts. I've been saying it for months and months and months, and I think it's now coming true.
Well, Herbie from Harrow, thank you so much for that call. And you know what? I think you are saying what is being said on the calls, what's being said on the text, and what's being said in the country. The anger is palpable. People have had enough. They are sick to the back teeth, and they want solutions, not problems. They want answers, not moans and groans and reasons why they can't achieve things. And we want you to keep telling us what you think. 0344 499 1000 when you want to call or WhatsApp us. Text in with the word talk at the start of your message to 87222, or follow and message us on X at talkTV. We'll see you shortly.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back here, listeners, to me, Jonathan Gullis, sipping in for the great Ian Collins on the home of common sense. That is Talk. And we want you to keep talking to us. And that you can do that by calling 0344 499 1000. You can text in the word talk at the start of your message to 87222. And you can message and follow us on X at talkTV. We go next to the Talk Royal correspondent, that is Rupert Bell, about this big story today that says Prince Harry and his wife Meghan Markle are going to have their £100 million deal with Netflix scrapped. The streamer apparently is not going to renew their contract when it expires in September. That's after it's understood the shows to have flopped. Rupert, how are you?
Very good, thank you.
How bad is this for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle? Is this inevitable, or do you think that someone will want to deal with them somewhere because they are still a big brand?
Look, they create interest, but if your history of making programmes has not been as successful as they thought, you're taking a bit of a risk. You saw when Spotify launched, and then we had a podcast, and that flopped, and then Meghan had to go, I don't know whether cap in hand, to another podcast company to produce what I have to say was a pretty boring podcast series. So when it look at their Netflix track record, of course, we had the documentary about leaving the royal family, and that was definitely going to always create eyeballs because that's been their brand. It's to have a pop at the royal family, hence the reason why Harry produced the book Spare. But since then, we've had a very underwhelming polo documentary, which, of course, Harry's into polo, but talk about it being niche. And actually, again, that was as dull as ditchwater. And then you have the As Ever cooking programme, which, again, was even duller than ditchwater. So I have to say it hasn't gone well. Now, some people may have liked it, whether I'm the target market, but I do come from an equestrian background, so I could have given the polo programme some credence if it was, but it just turned into a lot of ego, sort of rather American egos, all vying for camera, and we never saw Harry and Meghan. So really, their track record is not worth 100 million at the moment. And I think, given that Netflix is tightening belts, they've got to look at where they spend their money. Now, if someone else comes along, yes, but it won't be in that kind of numbers. It may be on a, right, what have you got? And let's pay you per programme.
And I think, Rupert, this comes to the crux of it, doesn't it? Which is when people are now tuning in, especially in the world that we live in where you've got online streamers and YouTubers making a fortune as well, people are looking for personality. They want to feel that they're seeing the person behind the screen. And like you say, with Meghan's cooking show, it turned out that wasn't even her kitchen. It all looks very staged, very scripted. And Harry looks like he's unable to relax in front of a camera, something that shouldn't shock us when he so quickly and so angrily constantly derided the media throughout his teenage years and 20s. So is it a case of just until they're willing to get real and try and relax and be human, that simply the public are just going to get bored and tuned out?
Well, we've got another series of the cooking programme, because they did announce that they've recorded another one. That was done before the first one came out. And I have to say, I'm not holding my breath. I'm presume, where's she going to go from flour sprinkles, which was the only thing I seem to, the only takeaway from it, and chopping up fruit. And, you know, I'd be interesting. But as you say, it was so staged. And, you know, good cooking shows are ones where you can feel the passion of the chef, or whoever is cooking actually transmits their enthusiasm for it. All the good ones are about that. This just didn't seem to have anything other than, I've got to look at the camera, I'm interviewing somebody, but I'm not really interviewing somebody, I'm just talking at them. And that is not what works. And the same with her podcast series. You feel like she was talking at the guests. And until she learns to actually try and make it about who she's got with her, and then the cooking maybe a hint, something to link it to, then maybe there is some mileage. But her products that she's launched, you know, are not going down 100 miles an hour. So the whole thing is badly thought out. And Netflix will, if they do renew it, and yes, we're hearing they may not, it will be, I'm sure, on a hugely different financial arrangement, which won't be sit comfortably with the Sussex's lifestyle, which is an expensive one.
And obviously, Rupert, this comes amongst a time when we've had a lot of briefing into the paper that representatives from His Royal Highness, the King, as well as Prince Harry, have been meeting in secret and in private, although we now know about it, so it wasn't that secret or that private in the end, to try and find some reconciliation, to try and find a way of repairing the relationship. But interestingly, seemingly just between Prince Harry and the royal family. I mean, does the collapse of the media career essentially help Prince Harry try and rebuild the relationship with his family, which I actually really want to see? No father and son should ever be estranged. And those grandchildren of His Royal Highnesses, the children of Prince Harry, are missing out on having a chance to get to know a grandfather and their step-grandmother, which I think is a great shame too. And obviously there's also been the rumours that we're seeing more and more events where Prince Harry and Meghan Markle appear to be doing their own thing and not necessarily seen together. There's rumours that maybe there is a strain in that relationship too. I mean, do we know any further updates in terms of how things are looking for the repairing of the relationship between the royal family and Prince Harry and Meghan Markle?
I would suggest it's a long way to go for that to be repaired. I think at the moment the King would love to restore his relationship with his son. It was interesting that the other day Harry did go to, did that walk through the landmines in memory of his mother, and that's what he's good at. And he was on his own, and I absolutely applaud him from that. That was what he was known for, and I think we'll see more of that. And presumably that trip would have, you know, there would have been some form of liaison to say, look, I'm going off there, because it wasn't straightforward. So people just to understand. But that's what he was good at, and that's a shame, and that's what the royal family have missed. But there's absolutely no chance that Meghan really wants to set foot in this country again. I'm absolutely convinced about that. Yet, at the same time, she's absolutely touting her link to the royal family. You know, everything is as ever, and royalty, British things, jam, you know, all trying to create this sort of exclusive British lifestyle. So the hypocrisy is writ large there. But at the same time, that's all they've got to market themselves on, is their link to the royal family. Because at the moment, whatever Meghan's done, yes, it gets views, but it's not actually hitting the spot in terms of people actually enjoying it. And that's their problem. But for Harry, I think he's in a sort of rudderless no man's land kind of situation, not sure what he's doing now he's turned 40, because he's done all the popping at the royal family, but if he wants to repair his damage, he can't do that anymore, because that will close the door as soon as it was opened.
And as you say, Rupert, the Prince Harry I want to see is the Prince Harry I remember growing up, the man who fought tooth and nail to be allowed to go and serve on the front line in secret so he could actually protect this nation. The man, whilst on camera, got up and sprinted off to a helicopter when the alarm went off and the base was under attack. The Prince Harry, therefore, who showed us that he was different, he was a modern royal, that he didn't want his title to get in the way of his entitlement to be allowed to do his duty and his service for his country. And I thought that was so refreshing, alongside obviously his brother, Prince William, who obviously also actually served on the front line in the military too. And I think it's just a great shame that Harry seems to be lost. And I think that if that Harry can come back, as you say, with the memory of his mother walking through those landmines, the British people will actually very quickly, I think, willing to forgive and forget and embrace him, as long as I think his wife stays at home in America.
Well, this is the problem for him, because he's made his new life. I think he's fairly friendless. He's, cut links with many of his friends, and whereas Meghan also is, no family links with her family apart from her mother, it would seem. And for Harry, what link has he got with his extended family? It's pretty minimal at the moment, and that's sad for him. And because the royal family, for all its faults, at times, is a pretty close-knit unit. Because they all know what they're going through and they look after one another. But at the moment, that's just not. He's created this problem, and somehow he's got to then find, I don't know, the will to say, look, I think I've screwed up here. And I need to get back to what I know I do best, and with your blessing. And at the moment, that's not likely to happen, because the trust between his brother is absolutely at rock bottom. The king is obviously pained. He would love to have his relationship with his son restored. And as you said, quite rightly, everyone would want that. But he has created this difficulty, and the lack of trust between him, his wife, and the rest of the royal family is a chasm that stretches from here to Los Angeles, and it's not closing.
Well, thank you so much. That's Talk's royal correspondent Rupert Bell. Thank you for joining us today regarding Prince Harry and Meghan Markle not having their £100 million deal with Netflix renewed. In fact, it's being scrapped as of September, that indeed is going to hurt the pockets. And on the royal theme, we should now go to William, who's in North Yorkshire, who has a unique idea, I suggest, about how the King, His Royal Highness King Charles, should be stepping in before things get out of hand. Hello, William. How are you?
I am good. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
No, thank you for coming on. So what do you think needs to happen, William, in order to get this country back on track and repair the social fabric?
Well, first of all, I think a general election should be called straight away. Yeah?
Yeah.
Let's get these clowns out, because they have done nothing but bring the country down since they've been in power for a year. Yeah?
Yeah.
Secondly, I'd like to see is the King standing up for his country, showing a bit of backbone. Okay, this is his country. He is our king. He has got a right to see. He's got more power in his one finger than that government has got. Now, I'd like to see him standing up for this country now, because he's more certainly would.
And how do you think he does that? Do you think in literally him coming out and saying, or calling Keir Starmer and saying you need to dissolve Parliament, you need to go into the country, you've clearly lost the trust of the British people and it's time for the election to take place?
That's what needs to happen now. He needs to dissolve. The King needs to stand up and be accountable for his people. And he needs to dissolve this government, which is corrupt and spineless and cowardly. Okay? And the British people are getting walked over. And the British people will only take so much. I'm ex-veteran. I've served for 30 years this country.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you for saying that. It was the second time somebody said that to me in my whole life. 30 years, yes. And I've seen this country. And whoever we go to war with, we always seem to bring them back for some reason. Iraq, Afghan. We always seem to bring these people back. I don't know why. But this company needs to look for itself now. Needs to look after itself. All these immigrants coming in, they are taking the mickey now. And what I think should happen also is the army should be deployed to these hotels to control the movement of these people coming into the country, because we know nothing about them. Yeah, and obviously in the news, you're seeing it in social media as well, about rapes and touching kids and all the rest of it. It stops now. It needs to stop now.
Well, William from North Yorkshire, thank you so much for calling us today. And again, thank you for your service to the nation as an ex-serviceman. And a powerful call there about the need for the King to now step in and take control of Keir Starmer, tell him to dissolve his government, to go to the country, let the people decide who's in charge. Because within a year, William thinks that this government has already lost the ability to not just control the public mood in terms of keeping them positive, but actually just control of law and order in general. We'll see you again after this break.
Labour government is using this ridiculous, in my opinion, and in Reform's opinion, this ridiculous policy of early release of prisoners because the prisons are full. That is not a solution. Why are we letting out dangerous criminals onto our streets, putting the public safety at risk because the prison places, there's not enough prison places. What we should
build them then. Build 10 more prisons. I don't get it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's me, Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for the great Ian Collins in the final 10 minutes of our show before I hand over to the fantastic Jeremy Kyle for his drive time show between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. We've had you texting, we've had you calling all about what's going on in this great country of ours that seemingly gets more and more broken. And even the Prime Minister himself is admitting that social unrest is likely due to the mistrust. You can call in 0344 499 1000. Text in the word talk at the start of your message to 87222 or message and follow us on X at talkTV. Let's get to Richard, who's in West Wales. He wants to talk to us about what's been going on outside the migrant hotel in Epping. Hello, Richard. How are you?
Hello, Jonathan. I'm fine. I'd like to echo the comments of Steve, the ex-cop you had on earlier. For decades now, big games, the police have segregated separate football fans to prevent trouble. We've seen situations of protests and counter-protests in the past where police have segregated them to prevent trouble. So why did Essex police go totally against past police protocol? The only reasons I can think is one, incompetence, which wouldn't surprise me, but almost as if they're trying to provoke trouble, knowing that if these peaceful protests, there could be peaceful protests all around the country. And I think if they could try and make them look unpeaceful and violent, I think it's an effort to stop these people going out and protesting, which is our right. But why did they not segregate them?
Well, I think that's a really great question, Richard. And were you shocked? Because about this, the Chief Constable of Essex Police was asked about the decision to allow, as you say, the counter-protests, the stand-up to racism Antifa far-left loons, who were obviously clearly looking for a bit of trouble in most cases, are being obviously marched in and out, it seemingly seems, via video footage that we've seen going on X today, towards the protest. He has said, as the Chief Constable, that was a decision made by officers on the ground and that senior management weren't involved. Isn't that a complete disgrace to throw your officers on the ground under the bus when clearly they would have felt they were following the orders of the bosses ahead above them?
I was absolutely flabbergasted. I mean, to be honest, that whole press conference was gaslighting, just making an excuse for himself. Now, those coppers on the ground, they weren't just led by a sergeant. There'll have been at least an inspector, probably a chief inspector running it. And they talk to the chief. The chief puts down what the policy is going to be. But if I could just say one thing, I checked out the IOPC website earlier. If people aren't happy about that, complain to the IOPC. It will actually go direct to Essex Police. But if the police forces keep doing this, and as I say, provoking violence is a bit of an accusation to make, but it seems that that's almost what they want. They want peaceful protesters to appear to be violent now.
Well, thank you so much, Richard, based in West Wales on that call. And obviously to put forward Essex Police's viewpoint, they would argue that they were simply allowing, as the Chief Constable said, others to have their right to protest in counter to those who were on the anti-migrant protests outside the hotel, and that he was simply following operational duties and that he only acted, or his officers, sorry, I should say, only acted when those people chose to break the law. We've had other texts and calls coming in today. Steve from Cambridge saying, well, I agree with everything your caller said regarding the King. Sadly, the King is just a woke puppet, and unrest in the UK doesn't affect his world. So strong words there. Another message coming in. This deep-seated resentment is on Starmer, who cannot stifle our anger for much longer. The police and judiciary are under his command. Another one from Brad here. Henry, and that's Henry Bolton, international border control expert. Henry was absolutely correct. Starmer may well wish to smash the gangs, but he has no interest at all in stopping the migrants. This is the disconnect with the public that is deeply embedded in ideology, which won't, a deeply embedded ideology won't allow him to see the reality. Another one saying, Jonathan, everyone attending protests across the UK now should have accept no less than the police-led bus service. Interesting one there. Chris Sinclair texting in saying Home Office and delivery this is about. They just log in at a different address. There has to be more done to the companies themselves for to act more aggressive on who is on their platform and how they identify the driver on daily basis. Same way as you have to jump through lots of hoops to access banks, government, NHS, etc. I think there is certainly something that needs to be said about putting more pressure there. And we've got another call, this time Sean in Northampton. Hello, Sean, how are you?
Hello, mate. How are you? Good.
Oh, I'm delighted to have you on the show. Now, look, you were talking about Angela Rayner's come to the same conclusion that Keir Starmer is basically not capable of running the country. Do you think it's time for Ange to take over?
No, I most certainly don't. I really hope she never does. I wouldn't put her in charge of a phone box. But I do think, though, that she's realised that he's at his weakest point now. And I think she knows she's got absolutely zero support within the country. And I think she's just going to milk it. She knows that Nigel Farage has got the whole country now focused on immigration. So she's going to jump on the bandwagon and see where it takes her.
And what do you make about her comments? I mean, it was quite extraordinary to have briefed out that she was essentially 24 hours on from Nigel Farage reciting the exact same rhetoric. Do you think that this shows that big trouble is ahead for Keir Starmer if he doesn't get on top of this soon?
I think it shows that everyone is realising now that Reform are a completely different party than they were, say, 5 years ago, and that the British public, that's all public, middle class, working class, whatever class have we got left in this country, all of us people are now speaking the same language. And all of a sudden we've now got a leader we can relate to who is continually telling everybody the truth. And now they both know, Tories and Labour, they both know that unless they kind of join that crowd, they're on their own. Because at the end of the day, listening to your show every day or on talk radio every single day, I just get irate in the car. I mean, the country is in such a complete and utter mess. When I heard that Chief Constable talking about the police's job to bust in opposition, the man's completely off his trolley. What's he doing in charge of a police force?
Well, thank you so much, Sean. I think you speak for the nation when it comes to your anger and frustration. And I'm delighted to be joined by the man taking over after me, the host of Drive on Talk. That is a friend of mine called Jeremy Kyle, on between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. Jeremy, what are you going to be talking about?
I've no idea. Listen, but honestly, I've got no idea. But brilliant, boy. I'm so proud of you. You've been fantastic today. I am really, and I know you're an MP, I cannot believe how disgusting this Essex police story is. Can we just forget everything else? Can we just ask, in terms of the society we live in? Peter Bleksley said this on Alex's show on Sunday, and everybody went, no. There is video footage that Farage has put out, which tells us that a police force that's supposed to be on this earth to protect us is bussing in the other side of an argument to try and make it a demonstration that... Why? I want somebody to explain to me why. Is it because they don't like normal people protesting? Is this ideology? Is this government bad? This is frightening.
Well, we had an ex-copper call in who said that it's a qualified right, your right to protest, not an absolute right. And by that means that the Chief Constable did not have to allow the counter-protest to take place. They could have said on public safety grounds that protest won't be allowed to happen and just tough luck. And so he was saying that any damage that was caused, any harm that was caused, any people who have been arrested should be exonerated and compensated, and Essex police are culpable for actually breaking the very rules that they're meant to enforce.
I mean, absolutely, but beyond that, they are bussing far left activists, far right, whatever they are, it doesn't matter, right?
Balaclavaed up most cases or masked up.
To create tension that allows our Prime Minister post Southport, for example, to say everybody's far right. That is frightening.
Well, isn't it amazing?
That's frightening.
We suddenly get the readout. Angela Rayner is very much concerned about it, and Keir Starmer's quickly now saying, oh, I agree with Angela. Maybe it's because he's so desperate to cling on to power.
They're demanding action from ministers to avoid a repeat of the violence that shook the country. He's the bloody Prime Minister. He should be doing more to deal with illegal migration. We had a wonderful video yesterday. You might have seen it on Twitter. Mother of three, blonde-haired lady, down